Mask Off, a memoir, written and narrated by Joshua Eric Jensen. Copyright 2026 by Joshua Eric Jensen. Author's notes. This memoir is based on the author's lived experiences. Some names and identifying details have been changed. Certain conversations have been reconstructed from memory, and some events and timelines have been condensed or combined for clarity and narrative flow. Dedication. This book is dedicated to my grandmother, Sharon Galindo, my dog, Tyson Mello, and the rest of my grandparents, Jerry Jensen and Tony Parks, who both passed away within the first 3 months of my life, Marcus Galindo and J.R. Churchman and Virginia Churchman. It's also written in loving memory of my Aunt Julie.
You have autism.
The therapist said it calmly, as if she was reading the results of a blood test. 3 words, delivered in a quiet office specifically decorated to prevent people from losing their shit. I stared at her. There were soft chairs, a framed picture of trees, and a plant that looked healthy enough to suggest somebody in the building had their life together. Above us, a fluorescent light hummed. It wasn't loud, not really. But once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. The hum sharpened until it felt less like a sound and more like something pressing against the inside of my skull. Then the office disappeared. I was 9 years old again. It was Saturday morning, and my bedroom was dark. Click. The ceiling light exploded above me. Click. Darkness. Click. Light. Click. Darkness. My father stood in the doorway with one hand on the switch, flicking it up and down like he was trying to communicate with an aircraft. "Get your ass out of bed," he yelled. "You've got yard work." I pulled the blanket over my head. The fabric did almost nothing. The light kept punching through it. Bright, dark, bright, dark. While his voice filled the room, my body was awake before my mind was. My heart was already sprinting while the rest of me was still trying to remember what day it was, where I was, and why the world had suddenly become an emergency. In my head, the bedroom turned into a police raid. Red and blue lights spun across the walls. A helicopter circled the house. My father's voice came through the megaphone. "Come out from under the blanket with your hands where I can see them." Then came the threat. "If you don't get up right now, I'm gonna whip your ass." That part always confused me. He kept threatening to whip my ass, but as far as my nervous system was concerned, the light switch had already started. I didn't have words like sensory overload. I didn't know that a nervous system could react to light and sound as if they were physical danger. I only knew that other people seemed able to wake up without feeling like a tactical team had breached the house. So I assumed the problem was me. That assumption became one of the main organizing principles of my childhood. Whatever I was feeling, everyone else probably felt it too. They were simply better at handling it. I crawled out of my bed in twisted pajamas, missing one sock and shielding my eyes. My father was still yelling. The actual assignment, weeds, leaves, moving something heavy, whatever job had been selected for that morning, barely registered. The first task was surviving the transition from sleep to being screamed at. He saw hesitation as defiance. He saw overwhelm as laziness. He saw a child taking too long to process a command and interpreted it as a personal challenge to his authority. I saw an adult who seemed completely comfortable turning the room into chaos and then becoming angrier because I was affected by it. Neither of us knew I was autistic. Only one of us was 9. Back in the therapist's office, the light above us continued humming.
Where did you go just now?
I looked up at her. Saturday morning.
Was that common?
I almost laughed. That was Saturday. She waited. Therapists are good at that. They leave silence sitting between you until you either feel it or become aware of how badly you want to escape it.
What did you think was happening to you?
I thought I hated yard work. That was true, but it wasn't the truth. I hated being pulled from one state into another without warning. I hated the lights. I hated the volume. I hated that by the time I reached the yard, I had already burned through enough adrenaline for an actual emergency. Then I was expected to spend the morning following instructions from the person who had created the emergency. I had no way to explain any of that. Even if I had understood it, I doubt the explanation would have helped. My father did not generally treat my internal experience as useful information.
Did you ever tell him the lights hurt?
No.
Why not?
I thought about the question. The answer seemed obvious now, which meant it had probably been invisible then, because he would have called me stupid. My father used that word so often, it became less of an insult and more like a diagnosis. Stupid explained why I forgot instructions. Stupid explained why I could do something complicated one day and fail something simple the next. Stupid explained why adults spoke to me as if their meaning should be obvious and become furious when it wasn't. When a parent tells you what you are, you do not begin with the assumption that he is an unreliable narrator. You begin by building your identity around the information he gives you. I did not grow up secretly believing I was brilliant. I grew up believing my father had correctly identified the problem. The strange part was that I could often perform intelligence very well. I could talk, I could make people laugh, I could notice patterns other people missed. I could read words aloud with confidence that made adults expect understanding to follow. Sometimes it didn't. That became the next memory, waiting behind the light switch, my grandmother's house, cigarette smoke in the sunlight, dinner cooking in the kitchen, and a book in my hands that I could read perfectly without knowing what the hell I had just read.
Chapter 2. You read good.
My grandmother's house smelled like cigarettes and dinner. Those two smells lived together so completely that I still have trouble separating them in memory. Cigarette smoke hung in the sunlight while my grandfather cooked steak and potatoes or something else solid enough to count as a real meal. My grandmother was white, my grandfather was Mexican, and the house belonged to both of them the way certain homes belong to marriage rather than either person individually. It was loud enough to feel alive, but not loud in a way that my house was loud. Nobody entered her living room by attacking a light switch. She called me Joshy, and I called her Grandma. I was her only grandson, which never stopped her from telling me I was her favorite. Favorite grandson, she would say. I'm your only grandson. That's why you're undefeated. The joke never changed. It didn't need to. Repetition can become its own kind of affection. On the day I remember most clearly, my father was angry because I could read but could not explain what I had read. To him, this was not evidence of an unusual processing problem. It was proof that I was stupid. My grandmother asked me to read to her. I do not remember the title of the book. That is almost too perfect. What I remember is holding it, seeing the shape of the chapter on the page, and knowing exactly what success would look like. Do not stumble. Pronounce every word correctly. Keep your voice steady. I could do that. Reading aloud was a performance with visible rules. The words were lined up in front of me. I could take them one at a time and make them sound the way they were supposed to sound. I concentrated so hard on delivering each word correctly that sentences passed through me without leaving much behind. I read the entire chapter beautifully. When I reached the end, I closed the book and felt proud I had not messed up. I had demonstrated in front of the adults that whatever my father believed about me could not possibly be true. Grandma smiled. You read really good. I beamed. Then she asked, what was it about? Everything inside my head went blank. I looked at the cover as if the answer might be printed there. I looked at Grandma. I looked at my father. The story had disappeared so completely that I could not even offer a bad summary. I don't know. My father's action was immediate. See? That one word carried a full argument. See? I told you. See? This proves it. See? There is something wrong with him, and the wrong thing is stupidity. My pride collapsed so fast it almost felt physical. A few seconds earlier, I had believed I had done the task perfectly. Now I was learning that I had misunderstood the task itself. Grandma did not know why I had retained nothing. Nobody in the room knew. But she understood something more important than the explanation. He isn't stupid, she said. My father pointed towards the book. He just read a whole chapter and doesn't know what happened. Then help him understand it instead of calling him names. I cannot promise those were the exact words. Childhood memories do not preserve transcripts, they preserve force. What I remember is that she stood between his conclusion and me. She did not solve the reading problem. She refused to let his explanation become the only one. Then she patted the place beside her. Come sit by me, favorite grandson, only grandson. That was grandma's particular kind of protection. She could not always tell me what was happening, but she could tell me what was not true. I was not stupid. Unfortunately, her voice had competition. My father's opinion followed me home. His was the voice attached to discipline, work, mistakes, money, and daily life. He said stupid more often than anybody else said otherwise. Over time, repetition did what repetition does. It became familiar enough to me to feel factual. For most of my life, I believed him. Then, in January of 2019, when I was 33, I took an IQ test during a vacation from work. Some people go somewhere warm when they take time off. I apparently use vacation days to challenge my own identity on the internet. The score came back around 130. I did not look at the number and think, of course. I have always known I was gifted. I thought the test was wrong, so I took another one. The score was about the same. The following January, I took more. Again, the results clustered around the same place. This became a yearly ritual. I would take time off of work, sit at a computer, and ask a collection of unrelated websites to settle an argument between my adult brain and my father's voice. They kept taking my side. Online IQ tests are not divine revelation. I understand that. But repeated scores in the same range were enough to damage a belief I had carried for decades. The identity of stupid could no longer explain everything as neatly as it once had. That should have been pure relief. It wasn't. If I was stupid then, my struggles made sense. Stupid was painful, but it was simple. Stupid explained why reading could feel easy while comprehension disappeared. It explained why I missed meanings other people considered obvious. It explained why I could notice complex patterns and then forget a basic instruction. Being smart created a worse question. If I wasn't stupid, why did so many ordinary things still feel harder than they appeared to be for everyone else? The therapist leaned forward slightly when I told her this.
How did you feel when you saw the score?
Suspicious, not validated. Eventually, at first, I thought several websites had formed a conspiracy to improve my self-esteem. She smiled, but only a little. She was learning that humor was not always proof that I felt light about the subject.
What changed after you believed the result?
I stopped believing my dad was right.
Did that help?
It removed one explanation,
And left you with what?
the actual problem. I did not know that the answer would be autism. I only knew that competence and difficulty had been living side by side inside me for as long as I could remember. Other people saw whichever one was convenient for them. When I performed well, the difficulty disappeared from their understanding of me. When I struggled, the competence disappeared. My grandmother had been one of the few people willing to hold both at once. She could be proud of how I read and still defend me when I could not explain it. She did not require one truth to erase the other.
How did you survive believing you were the problem?
I knew the answer before she finished the question. I got popular. She looked at me, waiting for the joke. There wasn't one. Popularity was not accidental. Popularity was not an accidental detail of my childhood. It was the first system I ever studied well enough to believe it might save me.
Chapter 3. Popularity will fix everything.
I was not the lonely autistic kid sitting alone in the corner. That would have made the story easier for people to understand. I was funny, athletic, attractive, and one of the most popular kids in school. I could walk into a hallway and have people call my name. I could make a group laugh. I could catch a football. I knew how to dress. I knew who looked cool, and when I saw something cool, I wanted to make that a part of myself. I did not stand behind the gym analyzing another kid's posture like a scientist collecting data. I would see someone walk and think that's cool. That's how I should walk. There's a difference. In 1994, I fell in love with professional wrestling. Wrestling taught me that entering a room mattered. A person could become larger through posture, timing, music, clothes, and the confidence to act like everyone had been waiting for them. In 1995, hip hop took over the rest of the education. Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise was the first rap album that belonged to me. I was 9, turning 10, and did not experience the music as background entertainment. It was instruction, atmosphere, identity, and possibility. LL Cool J gave me overalls with one strap undone and a pant leg rolled up. Michael Jordan gave me an athletic ideal. AC Slater made me believe my hair might eventually curl in the back if I remained committed to the cause. It did not. I still gave it time. These influences were not fake versions of me. I loved them. They became mine because I chose them. The problem was not I borrowed from people I admired. Everybody does that. The difference was how much faith I placed in the construction. I believed that if I assembled the right version of myself, life would become manageable. More specifically, if I could become popular, life would be fine. Popularity looked like protection. Popular kids were invited. Popular kids were defended. Popular kids could say strange things and have them interpreted as jokes. They could dress differently and still have style. If people already liked you, they gave you more room to be confusing. I learned that before I knew I was learning it. Birthdays were one of the first places I saw the system clearly. My friends and I knew everybody's birthday, not approximately, exactly. Zek's was September 23rd. Kyle's was October 3rd. Mine was November 6th. Vern's was December 17th. Those dates formed a social calendar. A birthday was not just the anniversary of your birth. It was the public measurement of how many people wanted to show up for you. Zek was the most popular kid. His family owned the movie theater and the ice cream parlor. For one of his birthdays, he got to bring the Super Nintendo into the theater and play Mario on the giant screen while everybody ate pizza and ice cream. Try competing with that when your family does not acknowledge your birthday exists. One year, Zek was mad at me, and I missed the Super Nintendo part. The next year, he invited me, and we watched a movie privately. Even the invitation carried status. Getting back in meant something. It meant I had recovered my place. At home, birthdays followed different rule. We did not celebrate them. When I asked my father why, he told me he had not been able to celebrate his birthday when he was a kid. Therefore, my sister and I would not celebrate ours either. This was presented as a complete explanation. My father had a habit of treating his childhood deprivation as a family tradition. If something had hurt him, fairness did not mean preventing it from hurting us. Fairness meant making sure the pain continued evenly. My mother accepted the rule. That part became more difficult to understand as I got older. My father made the decision, but my mother never interrupted it. She never threw me a private celebration, took me somewhere alone, or created a birthday memory outside of his authority. She stayed in her place, and her place did not include fighting for mine. As a little kid, I did not have that language. I only knew birthdays made kids important, and mine made me vulnerable. Then one year, I actually got the flu on my birthday. It was perfect. Not physically. Physically, I felt terrible. But socially, the illness solved everything. I did not have to go to school. Nobody could ask what I was doing that day. Nobody could wonder why they had not been invited. Nobody could compare my empty birthday to a private movie theater full of pizza, ice cream, and Nintendo. The flu protected the secret. The next year, I was healthy. That was inconvenient. I woke up on November 6th and then understood immediately that I had a problem. Going to school meant questions. Questions meant answers. Answers meant telling the truth, inventing something better. I chose illness. I practiced coughing in bed. The first attempt sounded fake. The second sounded like a cartoon character dying. Eventually, I found the one that seemed reasonable. My mother came into the room and told me to get ready. I think the flu came back, I said. She touched my forehead. You don't feel warm. It's internal. I do not remember if I used those exact words, but I remember the strategy. I needed the symptoms she could not easily disprove. Then my father yelled from another room that if I stayed home, I could help him with yard work. Suddenly, I was willing to consider a remarkable recovery. That was the risk of using sickness to escape a social problem in the house where illness did not necessarily excuse labor. Whether I stayed home that particular year or forced myself through school, the larger pattern remained. I began treating my birthday like a threat to be managed. I was not trying to avoid attention because I disliked being popular. I was trying to prevent people from discovering the gap between the life they assumed I had and the life waiting for me at home. When classmates asked what I received, I learned to give answers that created fewer questions. A bunch of stuff: shoes, games, money, anything calming enough to sound believable and vague enough to avoid details. If they pushed, I could cough. Being contagious was an effective boundary long before I learned I was allowed to set one honestly. The lie was not elaborate because I enjoyed deception. It was efficient. I had identified a social problem and built a system around it. That was how my mind worked. I looked for patterns, found the point of danger, and tried to control the variables. The danger was not having no presence. The danger was being exposed as less wanted than I appeared. The distinction mattered. I had already begun collecting visibility, popularity, and love. The kids with the biggest celebrations looked like the most valued. The kids who could fill a theater had proof. I did not yet understand that being seen and being loved were different experiences. I only understood the ranking. The therapist asked why popularity mattered so much. Because I thought it would fix everything.
Did it?
It's fixed a lot of things. That was the uncomfortable answer. Popularity worked. It made people more forgiving. It gave me access. It made girls notice me. It let me control the mood of a room through humor. It reduced the risk that somebody else could define me first. It also gave me power, and I did not always use that power well. For years, I was a bully. That does not fit into every version of autism people prefer to consume. The autistic child is supposed to be innocent, isolated, and victimized by crueler children. I was frightened and misunderstood, but I was not harmless. Sometimes I was the cruel child. I could feel afraid of violence and still be willing to fight. I could misunderstand people and still understand status. I could be hurt at home and still hurt other kids at school. Popularity did not make life fine. It gave me an audience. Once I had one, I became terrified of losing it.
Chapter 4. The Verdict.
The classroom television arrived on a cart, which meant something important was about to happen. In the 1990s, teachers did not roll a television into the room casually. The cart came with ceremony: black metal shelves, wheels that rattled over every carpet seam in the floor, a VCR underneath, and a strap around the television in case education took a sharp turn. The moment it appeared, normal schoolwork was over. This time, the teacher said we were going to watch the verdict in the O.J. Simpson trial. I was in 5th grade. I understood that O.J. Simpson had been accused of killing 2 people. I understood that a trial was supposed to determine whether he had done it. I also understood that he had been a famous football player. The third fact had the most emotional weight for me. I hope he's not guilty, I said. A classmate turned around. Why? Because he's O.J. Simpson. The kid looked at me though I had answered a different question. He might have killed 2 people. I know, I said, but he's really good at football. That was not me making a sophisticated argument about the legal standard for reasonable doubt. I was not evaluating evidence. I was 10 years old, whose mind had filed O.J. Simpson under athlete, celebrity, winner. I did not want somebody from that category to become somebody from the category of murderer. When the words "not guilty" came through the television, I raised my arms like my team had scored. Nobody joined me. The room did not react the way a room was supposed to react when somebody famous won something. Some kids looked confused. Some looked uncomfortable. The teacher's face made it clear that this was not a touchdown. I lowered my arms. For years, the memory embarrassed me because it made me look heartless. It still does a little. 2 people were dead. 2 families had been destroyed. And I had interpreted the moment through sports fandom. But I do not remember feeling pleased that anyone had died. I remember failing to understand the invisible question everyone else was answering. They were asking, what does justice mean if a famous man may have killed 2 people? I was asking, what happens if a sports hero becomes the bad guy? The therapist asked if I believed autism explained that reaction. Not by itself, I said. I was also 10. 10-year-olds are idiots in ways no diagnosis can fully script for. She smiled.
But you remember the mismatch.
I remember everybody looked at me like I had missed something obvious. The feeling was familiar. It happened whenever people appeared to be participating in a conversation beneath the conversation. They heard sentence, but they also heard the moral expectation the social history, the correct emotional response, and the danger of choosing the wrong one. Sometimes I heard all of that too. Sometimes I did not. Popularity gave me a way to survive those misses. If people already thought I was funny, a strange response could become a joke. If they thought I was confident, confusion could look like boldness. If the room laughed, I did not have to explain whether I had meant to be funny. That is one reason I became so attached to an audience. Laughter covered uncertainty. It also rewarded cruelty. A few years before and after the OJ verdict, I was the kind of kid who could say something mean and make other children laugh. The laughter told me the line had worked. It did not tell me what the line had done to the person receiving it. At that age, reaction was easier to understand than consequence. The reaction was immediate. Faces turned toward me, friends repeated what I said, my place in the group became more secure. The consequence often happened somewhere else, after school, in a bedroom I never saw. I had spent enough time feeling small that making somebody else feel smaller could resemble power. That is not an excuse. It is the mechanism. The version of my childhood that would be easiest to sell is the one where I was misunderstood by adults, mistreated by kids until I finally discovered I was autistic. That version could make me innocent, and innocence is comfortable. It creates clean roles. My life was not that clean. I was bullied and I bullied people. I was afraid and I made other people afraid. I wanted protection, then used the protection popularity gave me to become dangerous to somebody with less of it. The television car eventually rolled out of the classroom. The trial disappeared into adult arguments I did not yet understand. What stayed with me was the room turning toward me, waiting for an explanation I could not give. It could not be the last time I realized too late that everybody else had been answering a different question.
Chapter 5. The Grandfather.
The girl had a grandfather. That should not have been surprising. Most children do. But when you make somebody into a target, you stop imagining the rest of their life. You see the desk where they sit, the clothes they wear, the expression they make when the joke lands. You do not picture the person they go home to. I was in 6th grade. A popular friend and I had been making fun of a girl at school. I did not remember every insult, and I'm grateful not to. I remember the feeling of having an audience. I remember knowing that she could hear us. I remember continuing anyway. Then one afternoon, her grandfather was waiting. He stood with her outside the school. She looked smaller beside him than she had in the classroom. Without our friends around, the entire situation changed shape. "Are you Josh?" he asked. My confidence left so quickly, it should have created wind. He knew my friend's name too. That made it worse. This was not a general warning from an adult who had caught children being loud. He had come for us specifically. He told us that she had been coming home upset. He told us we were making her cry. He asked whether making someone feel small made us feel big. I cannot reconstruct every word after all these years. I remember his anger, but more than that, I remember that he made us look at her, not glance at her while preparing another joke. Look at her. The classroom had given me applause. Her face gave me information. We apologized. We promised to leave her alone, and we did. I wish I could say empathy arrived fully formed that afternoon and permanently rewired me. It did not. At first, I understood the most basic lesson. People had families, and some of those families might show up. Consequences reached me before compassion did. There was another change happening at the same time. In my small Idaho town, younger students eventually shared hallways and spaces with much older ones. The social food chain became visible. In elementary school, being one of the tougher, more popular boys could feel like being near the top. Then you enter building with high school students who had shoulders, facial hair, cars, and no emotional investment in your reputation. A kid I could intimidate might have an older brother. A larger student might see me picking on somebody and decide I deserve a demonstration. Suddenly, cruelty carried risk that had not existed when the whole world was 12 years old or younger. My behavior improved before my morals did. I began checking the hallway before deciding how funny I wanted to be. This was not spiritual growth. It was threat assessment. But something changed that after. Once I started looking at people's faces for signs of danger, I also began seeing damage. A child trying not to cry, somebody laughing along too hard because refusing to laugh would expose them, the quiet that followed a joke after everyone else had moved on. I knew those expressions. I had made versions of them myself. The girl and I eventually became friendly, not in a dramatic movie way. There was no grand scene where she announced that I had earned forgiveness. We simply grew older, shared spaces, and became people rather than roles in sixth grade hierarchy. I've wondered what she remembers. Maybe the grandfather confrontation is a major event in my moral development and just one more ugly afternoon in her childhood. The person learning a lesson is really the person who paid the highest price for it. By the time I was older, I despised bullies. I could see the cheapness in what they were doing, converting another person's discomfort into social currency. I could see it because I had done it. That did not erase anything. The therapist asked why I had kept bullying in the story. Because it happened.
You could have left it out.
That's what the mask would do. The mask was not only confidence, it was editing. It removed anything that threatened the character I wanted people to see, the cool version of me, the tough version, the version that had always been more perceptive than the other people around him. That version was attractive and false. I was perceptive in some ways, oblivious in others. I could track who had status in a room while failing to understand what a joke cost the person at the bottom. I could be unusually sensitive and still act without sensitivity. Autism did not make me morally pure. Trauma did not make every choice inevitable. At some point, I had to become responsible for what I did with that information. I finally learned to see. The girl's grandfather gave me some of that information. He did not diagnose me. He did not ask me what was happening at my home or whether cruelty had become one of the languages available to me. He did something more immediate. He made the person I had reduced to a reaction become human again. After that, laughter never sounded quite as simple.
Chapter 6. Fear was private information.
By sophomore year, I had built a version of myself that looked athletic, confident, and difficult to embarrass. Football was part of the uniform. I was not a star. I did not run the offense or the anchor of the defense. I played on kickoff and kick return. The two parts of football where coaches line teenagers up at opposite ends of the field and ask them to become high-speed debris. My first game was against Shoshone Bannock team from the reservation near Fort Hall. Our school's mascot was the Indians. I looked down at the word across my jersey, then across the locker room at my teammate. Wait, I said, we're called the Indians, and they're actually Indian. Yeah, so they have a reason. I was already scared because it was my first real game. The mascot problem gave my imagination additional material. Someone repeated a rumor that players from other teams would strike with an open hand so they could get inside the opening of a face mask. I have no idea whether anyone had ever done that. High school football rumors were rarely peer-reviewed, but once the image entered my mind, it stayed there. A hand sliding through the bars on my helmet while I was trapped inside it. The locker room door opened and the stadium noise rushed in. Under the lights, the field felt larger than it had during practice. The players across from me were strangers. That mattered more than size. At practice, I knew the guy hitting me. I understood their tempers, their limits, and what would happen after the whistle. A stranger was an unwritten rule book running directly at me. We lined up for kickoff. The whistle blew. There's a moment on special teams when the field stops looking like organized football and becomes a collection of collisions waiting to choose you. I saw one player coming toward me. The rest of the stadium narrowed until he was the only object in it. Then impact. For a second, the sound disappeared. The stadium lights blurred above me. Somebody's mouth moved before their voice returned. You good? Yeah, I said. The answer came before I checked. That was automatic. You good did not mean please perform an accurate inventory of your nervous system and musculoskeletal condition. It meant, are you going to make this awkward? I was never going to make it awkward. I got up. My legs worked well enough to carry me away. That was close enough to good. Fear was real. It was private information. At practice, fear could become even stranger. If girls were standing near the fence, I hit harder. The effect was immediate. My posture changed. My speed changed. A drill that had been about technique became a public demonstration of toughness. I could flatten a teammate I knew, get up, and act like the collision meant nothing. Once, after I hit somebody much harder than the drill required, he looked at me and asked, "What the hell was that?" "Football," I said. "It's practice." Then he followed my eyes towards the girls. "You asshole." He was right. The strange part was that I could behave more aggressively in practice than in games. The girls did not remove fear. They made admitting fear unacceptable. The teammates were predictable enough that I could perform violence safely. The strangers in another uniform could react in ways I had not rehearsed. I did not feel brave. I needed to look brave from the correct angle. That rule extended far beyond football. At the snack bar during games, my friends brought pizza, nachos, and drinks. Sometimes I had no money. I would check my pockets even though I already knew that there was none in them. Maybe financial recovery had occurred inside my genes without my involvement. Nothing. "You getting anything?" someone would ask. "Not hungry." My story could growl loud enough to contradict me, and I would still maintain the position. A friend might offer a slice. "Take some. I'm good." I'd watch the steam rise off the pizza while pretending food had become conceptually uninteresting. Going hungry hurt less than looking broke. Hunger ended when I got home. The image of being a kid without money could follow me back to school. I had spent years constructing a life that looked bigger than the one I had lived. Admitting I could not afford snack bar pizza threatened the entire structure far more than it should have. So I laughed with everybody else and waited for the night to end. The therapist asked why I had not simply accepted the food, because then they would know
Know what?
that I didn't have money.
They were already offering you food.
I know that now. At the time, an offer could feel like exposure. Kindness required me to admit a need, and a need weakened the performance. I use the same line for almost everything. "I'm good." Hit so hard the sound disappears. "I'm good." Hungry enough to stare somebody else's pizza. "I'm good." Terrified of the person running toward me. "I'm good." The phrase was useful because nobody could disprove it without becoming intrusive. Most people accepted the answer and moved on. That's what I wanted. It was also the problem. Competence became proof that I did not need help. The better I became at hiding the costs, the less likely anyone would notice there was a cost at all. Football did not teach me to be fearless. It gave me a uniform for fear.
Chapter 7, The Weed Catcher.
In Shoshone, there was a place we called the Drops. It was fast-moving canal trapped between high concrete walls. Once you jumped in, the water decided the pace. You could not climb out wherever you changed your mind. The walls stayed beside you until the canal widened near a section of rocks where you had a chance to grab something and pull yourself free. A chance was enough for teenagers. The Drops came with a legend. Somewhere near the exit, according to generations of children who had never personally inspected it, was a weed catcher. The details changed depending on who was telling me the story, but the conclusion remained stable. If you missed the rocks, the machine would pull you in and kill you. Nobody I knew had seen it. Everybody knew exactly how it worked. In my imagination, it had rotating metal teeth. It lived beneath the water like farm equipment designed by a horror movie villain. Adults might have described a grate or maintenance structure. Kids understood a machine waiting specifically for us. My friends jumped in anyways. One of them disappeared into the canal and surfaced downstream yelling over the water. They made it look like a local ritual. Get in, ride the current, grab the rocks, climb out, insult the next person for hesitating. Then it was my turn. "You scared?" somebody asked. "No." There was no delay between the question and the lie. I was terrified. The concrete walls were the worst part. A lake gives fear room to imagine options. The canal showed you where there were none. Once the current had you, the only exit was ahead, near the place where the invisible death machine supposedly waited. I jumped. The cold hit first, then the speed. The current did not feel like swimming. It felt like being carried while attempting to negotiate. I aimed toward the widening section and kicked harder than I wanted anyone watching to know. The rocks approached. I reached. My hands hit the wet stone and slipped. For a second, every story about the weed catcher became factual. I could feel the canal taking me past the point where bravery mattered. Then somebody grabbed my wrist. A friend pulled me while I kicked against the current. My chest scraped the rock. I climbed out, coughing, breathing too hard, and trying to arrange my face into something casual. "You were scared," somebody said. No, I wasn't. I had nearly missed the exit. My body was shaking. The denial survived all available evidence. Then something dark moved beneath the surface. Every one of us ran. That part still makes me laugh. We could jump into a canal with concrete walls and rumored killing machine because courage was being observed. But an unidentified shape in the water turned the entire group back into children. The drops were not the only dangerous thing I did because my friends were doing it. I forced myself into situations I did not want, accepted risks I did not understand, and treated hesitations as a public defect. People often describe peer pressure as though somebody has to stand over you chanting. Most of mine was quieter. I watched what everybody else could do without appearing afraid, then demanded the same performance from myself. Sometimes they were afraid too. I did not know that because they were running the same program. The therapist asked whether jumping made me courageous. It made me sure nobody called me scared,
Those aren't the same thing.
but they were to me. I had built my identity around avoiding visible weakness. The problem with that system is that it rewards the most dangerous proof. Saying I was brave carried little value. Jumping into the canal made the claim harder to dispute. Each successful risk strengthened the character. Josh would do it. Josh was down. Josh was not scared. The reputation began making decisions before I did. That is one of the ways a mask becomes difficult to remove. It does not only hide you from other people, it starts issuing instructions. Jump. Hit harder. Do not take that pizza. Say you're good. The current carried all of us toward the same rocks. Some of us were stronger swimmers. Some were luckier. Some may have known there was no mechanical monster waiting beyond the exit. I only knew I would rather risk meeting it than let my friends watch me stay on the bank.
Chapter 8. Secret Admirer.
My mother sent Valentine's Day deliveries to school. Balloons, candy, sometimes a small arrangement large enough to draw attention when it entered the classroom. The card never said mom, it said secret admirer. The first time a delivery person appeared at the door and asked for me, every head turned. That was the point of classroom deliveries. They transformed affection into a public event. Josh? I raised my hand as though I had not already noticed the balloons floating above the doorway. The arrangements landed on my desk. Someone leaned over to read the card. Who sent it? Secret admirer, I said. Who? I shrugged. Could be anybody. I always knew it was my mother. She left the card unsigned because she did not want to embarrass me. She understood that a delivery from mom and a delivery from an unknown girl had different value inside the school economy. One said your parent loved you. The other said somebody wanted you. At that age, I wanted both, but only one improved my reputation. So I let the class investigate. Names were suggested. Girls denied involvement. Friends built theories. I acted calm, as though the mysterious admirer routinely sent balloons into my life. Then the balloons followed me through the hallway, catching on door frames and lockers while I tried to maintain dignity. There are few things less cool than wrestling romantic balloon arrangements through a crowded school doorway. I would free one ribbon and trap another, all while pretending the burden of desirability was normal. Underneath the performance, I felt loved. My mother and father had denied birthdays, but Valentine's Day gave her a route around the rules. I've often wondered whether she was sending us what she had wanted when she was young. Maybe she imagined what it would feel like to have your name called in class and proof of affection carried to your desk. Whatever the reason, she made sure I had the moment. This matters because the easiest version of my mother is also too simple. She failed to protect me in ways that shaped my life. She stayed passive when my father controlled the house. Later, she would refuse to stand behind me during conflicts where I believed she should have known better. Those choices are real. So are the balloons. A memoir can become another kind of courtroom if every memory is forced to testify for one verdict. Good mother, bad mother, loving, cowardly, present, absent. Human beings rarely cooperate with those categories. My mother could find a thoughtful way to make her children feel wanted and still fail to challenge the man who made them feel worthless. She could notice a need for public affection and miss the need for protection inside our own home. As a child, I did not organize her into contradictions. I took each moment as it arrived. The balloons arrived, the candy was real, the card was in my pocket. At school, the secret admirer protected the image I had built. At home, knowing the truth gave me something quieter. My mother had thought of me. She arranged the delivery. She had pictured the classroom door opening and my name being called. Being seen felt like being loved. The therapist asked whether I ever told my mother I knew. I don't think so.
Why not?
The secret was doing two jobs. At school, it made me look desirable. Between my mother and me, it allowed her to love me without demanding a conversation neither of us knew how to have. I kept the arrangement going. Could be anybody, I would say, but I knew that certainty was rare enough to keep. Years later, when I tried to understand my family, memories like Valentine's Day complicated the anger. It would have been easier if there had been no kindness. Easier if the person who had failed me every time. Instead, love appeared in flashes, balloons entering the classroom, grandma making room beside her, my grandfather cooking dinner, my mother later paying for the hospital when Tyson was dying. The flashes did not erase the darkness between them. They made it harder to pretend the darkness was the whole picture. At the end of the school day, I carried the balloons home. The secret admirer disappeared the moment I entered the house, but the card remained mine. I had learned to use attention as proof of value. That day, for once, the performance and the feeling underneath it wanted the same thing. They wanted me to believe somebody had chosen me.
Chapter 9, Everything at Once.
Years later, I lived with a deaf roommate named Eli. Our living room had 2 televisions, 2 game systems, and enough wires to suggest neither of us had prepared for adulthood correctly. We played online shooters together, sitting close enough to communicate, but far enough apart that neither screen interfered with each other. Eli watched his television, I watched mine. A third friend joined us through my headset. The arrangement worked because I became the bridge. The friend in my ear could speak to me, Eli could sign to me, I could take information from one language, move it through my brain, and send it out the other to another person without either person needing to think much about the process. That made me useful. It also created a situation in which everyone could communicate at the same time. One night we were deep into a match. The television flashed with gunfire, movement maps, and notifications. Footsteps approached through the game audio. Somewhere nearby, an enemy reloaded. My friend spoke through the headset. 2 enemies, right building. I looked towards Eli and signed, 2 right. He nodded and adjusted his position. Before I could turn completely back to my screen, Eli waved inside my peripheral vision. He signed a question. At the same time, the friend under my headset continued talking. One might be upstairs. I'm pushing around the back. Tell him to cover. Eli was still signing. The game kept moving. Gunfire broke from the right side of my television. Every source of information demanded the same thing from me. Attention, now. I listened to the spoken instructions while watching Eli's hands. I translated the message, monitored the match, aimed my character, checked the map, and tried to answer a question I did not completely process. Nothing stopped while I caught up. That was the problem. People sometimes imagine sensory overload as a dramatic event. Hands over the ears, eyes closed, somebody fleeing a crowded room while everyone around them understands that something had gone wrong. Mine often looked like competence. I kept playing. I relayed the instructions to Eli. I answered his questions. I warned my friend about the movement near the building. We coordinated the attack and won the fight. Eli reached over and fist bumped me. The friend in the headset celebrated. I smiled. Nobody knew that my brain felt as though 5 people had entered a doorway at once and became stuck there. The match continued. I did not say anything. I did not ask my friend to stop talking for a second. I did not tell Eli to wait until I finished listening. I did not explain that spoken language, sign language, game audio, visual movement, tactical decisions, and live translation had combined into something my nervous system could no longer separate cleanly. I handled it. Handling things was what I did. By then, my belief had followed me from childhood into adulthood. If I could complete the task, then the task could not be hurting me. Success erased the cost. The therapist leaned back slightly when I described the apartment.
Why didn't you ask one of them to wait?
I didn't want either of them to think they were the problem.
You could have said you needed a second.
That would have sounded like somebody was doing something wrong.
Was somebody doing something wrong?
No,
Then why would they have thought that?
because people usually think a boundary is an accusation. She let the answer sit between us. I had spent years learning how to make myself easy for other people. I could be funny when a room became uncomfortable. I could pretend not to be hungry. I could hide fear under shoulder pads. I could turn confusion into confidence before anyone recognized it as confusion. In the apartment, I made communication possible. My friend in the headset did not have to learn sign language. Eli did not have to learn the voice in my ear. Neither had to pause and wonder whether I could process both of them at once. I absorbed the inconvenience. That felt polite. It also felt safe. Being useful protected me from the possibility of becoming difficult. There was pride in it too. I liked being able to move between two languages. I liked that Eli trusted me. I liked that three of us could function as a team because I kept the information moving. Autism did not make me incapable of doing complicated things. Sometimes it made me capable of doing them so intensely that nobody noticed what they were costing me. I could lock in. I could track details. I could recognize patterns and translate movement into action. Under the right conditions, my brain felt less like a disability and more like a specialized equipment. The trouble came when everybody assumed the equipment could operate at maximum capacity forever. That included me. After a match, Eli might stretch, set down his controller, and walk into the kitchen. My friend would disconnect from his headset. The televisions would return to their menus. The apartment became quiet. Only then would I notice how tightly I had been holding my body. My jaw hurt. My shoulders had climbed towards my ears. My eyes felt exhausted from moving between televisions and Eli's hands. The information had stopped, but my nervous system had not received the message yet. It remained prepared for the next call out, the next movement, the next person, needing something translated immediately. I had no language for that. I only knew I needed everyone to leave me alone for a while. That created another contradiction. I loved spending time with people, but I often felt relief when they stopped interacting with me. For years, I believed that relief meant I did not care about them enough. Now I understand it differently. Sometimes I was not escaping the person. I was escaping the amount of processing required to remain available to them. The therapist asked what I did when the apartment became quiet. Nothing.
What does nothing mean?
I sat there.
Did that help?
Eventually,
Did Eli know?
no,
Did your friend?
no.
Did anyone?
I thought about it. Most people believe the version of me they could observe. If I complete the translation, won the match, returned the fist bump, and made the joke afterward, there was no reason to search beneath the performance. I had trained people well. The boy who had survived birthdays through strategic illness had become a man who could survive overload through strategic competence. Both systems accomplished the immediate goal. Neither allowed anyone to help me. Who could tell when you weren't okay, she asked. The answer entered the room before I had time to protect it with humor. Tyson. She waited. The fluorescent light continued humming above us. Who was Tyson? I looked down at my hands. The best thing that ever happened to me. I paused, against my wishes.
Chapter 10. Tiny Pause.
I was 27 when I woke up with an animal walking across my back. At first, I assumed I was dreaming. The pressure was too light to be a person and too organized to be random. 4 tiny points moved from my lower back toward my shoulders, with the confidence of something that had recently acquired access to a new continent. I opened one eye. A puppy stared directly into my face. He was a pit bull and a shepherd mix, with oversized ears, dark eyes, and the expression of somebody who had already reviewed the lease and found no restrictions that applied to him. What the hell is that? Maya stood up, near the bed, smiling.
Tyson?
The puppy licked my nose. I closed my eye. No.
He needed a home.
No.
Somebody was giving him away at Fred Meyer.
Take him back.
They're gone.
Tyson sat down between my shoulder blades as though the decision had been formally approved. I had gone to sleep without a dog. I woke up responsible for one. This was not how I preferred major changes to enter my life. I liked information in advance. I liked time to imagine possibilities, identify the problems, and construct a plan. I did not like waking up beneath an undocumented animal whose primary skill appeared to be violating my personal space. "He can't stay," I said. Tyson licked the side of my face. "He's not changing my mind." He crawled closer and placed his head beside mine. "This is manipulation." Maya laughed. Tyson stayed. The first thing I learned about him was that he was smart. The second was that his intelligence would be used primarily to invade my life more efficiently. He learned basic commands quickly. Sit, stay, come, down. Those were easy. And then came toy names, routes, routines, colors, and words that nobody had intentionally taught him. I could place several toys on the floor and ask for one. "Where's the green ball?" Tyson would inspect the options and choose the correct object and carry it back with his tail moving hard enough to affect steering. If I asked for a different toy, he returned with that one. He eventually understood more than 100 words. That did not mean he respected all of them. Tyson understood no. He simply considered it a recommendation. He knew when I was getting ready for work before I put on my shoes. He knew when we were going to the park from the direction I moved through the house. He recognized the preparation for yard work, skating, driving, and every activity he had decided belonged to both of us. Sometimes I would stand up without announcing anything. Tyson would already be at the door. "How the hell do you know?" He would look at me as though the question reflected poorly on my intelligence. Before Tyson, I believed language was mostly words. He taught me how much information existed before them. The way I shifted my weight, the direction of my eyes, the speed of my breathing, which pair of shoes I reached toward, whether I picked up my keys with purpose or only moved them out of the way. He studied me with the same intensity I had once used to study popular kids, wrestlers, athletes, and rappers. The difference was that Tyson was not trying to become me. He was learning how to stay beside me. He followed me from room to room. When I walked to the kitchen, he walked to the kitchen. When I went to the bathroom, he waited outside as though I had entered a dangerous facility without proper supervision. If I sat down, he leaned against me. If I lay down, he found a position that placed as much of his body against mine as physically possible. If I left for work, he cried. That should have annoyed me. Instead, it made returning home feel important. Popularity had once given me the experience of entering a hallway and hearing people call my name. Tyson gave me something quieter and more reliable. He behaved as though my return was the central event of his day. There was no audience, no reputation to maintain, no mystery admirer. I opened the door and somebody was overwhelmed with relief that I existed again. Tyson loved the park. He loved yard work. He loved following me while I skated. Anything became valuable if we did it together. I could be working outside, irritated by the heat, dirt, or interruption to whatever project I actually wanted to be doing. Tyson treated the same activity as a festival organized in his honor. I had spent my childhood being dragged into yard work through yelling, threats, and flashing lights. Tyson heard the word yard and became ecstatic. He did not remove the old association. He placed another one beside it. That happened repeatedly. A drive could be obligation or adventure. Silence could be loneliness or the sound of a dog sleeping nearby. Being followed could feel invasive or loving. The meaning depended on who was following and why. Tyson was playful enough to make training dangerous. Once I taught him to jump over an obstacle, he learned immediately. "Tyson, jump." He cleared it beautifully. Then he continued directly into me. His head connected with my groin at full speed. I folded in half while he celebrated the successful completion of the command. He knows more than 100 words, I said from the ground. Sorry is not one of them. Tyson licked my face. That was his general response to injury, sadness, anger, confusion, and most ordinary events. But he was not only affectionate, he was observant. There were moments when I believed I was hiding what I felt from everyone around me. My face remained normal. My voice stayed controlled. I completed whatever task had been placed in front of me. Tyson would stop playing and watch me. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not need to convert the feelings into language. He noticed the change before I admitted there had been one. Sometimes he pressed his body against mine. Sometimes he placed his head in my lap. Sometimes he simply remained where he could see me, his attention fixed on until whatever had happened inside my nervous system began to loosen. People wanted explanations. Tyson wanted proximity. I did not have to prove that the feeling was reasonable. I did not have to identify whether it come from autism, trauma, exhaustion, anger, grief, or something I had not processed yet. He treated the reaction as information. Something is happening to Josh. Stay close. That was the entire diagnosis. The therapist asked whether I believed Tyson understood me. Better than most people.
How?
He watched. Other people watched you. They watched the performance.
And Tyson?
He watched for changes. There is a difference between somebody seeing you and somebody monitoring whether you remain useful to them. Tyson did not care whether I was funny. He did not care whether I looked confident, had money, won the game, finished the project, or understood the conversation beneath the conversation. He liked me when I was active. He liked me when I was exhausted. He liked me when I was making something at 3 a.m, when I had become too overwhelmed to do anything at all. He never confused my productivity with my value. I had spent years trying to become the kind of person nobody would reject. Tyson arrived without asking me to become anything. That should have frightened me more than it did. Unconditional love removes the familiar assignment. There is nothing to study, copy, win, or maintain. You cannot secure it through a better performance because the performance was never the requirement. At first, I kept waiting for the condition. It never arrived. He became part of the structure of my days. His pause behind me in the hallway, his breathing beside me in the bed, his body pressed against my leg, the sound of his tags whenever he stood up to follow me into another room. I stopped imagining taking him back. Eventually, the idea became impossible. The puppy I had rejected before getting out of bed became the clearest proof I had ever received that I could be loved without being impressive. Then, when he was 6 months old, a car horn cut through the morning. Tyson was in the road.
Chapter 11. 6 months.
The sound came before the meaning. A horn, brakes, impact. By the time my brain arranged those noises into an event, I was already moving. Tyson was in the road. He was 6 months old. One moment, he had been a happy puppy with oversized ears and no respect for boundaries. The next, he was lying on the pavement while the entire world became one urgent instruction. Get to him. I ran into the street and dropped beside him. Don't move. I said, I've got you. It was an absurd command. Tyson was not choosing to lie still. His body had made that decision for him. But words were all I had, and saying them gave me the illusion that one of us was in control. His eyes found mine. That made everything worse. Pain is easier to imagine from a distance. When something you love looks directly at you from inside, the pain becomes an assignment. Fix this. I lifted him carefully as I could. At the veterinary hospital, they took him away from me. That was the first unbearable part, not the cost, not the diagnosis. The doors closed in between us. A vet explained that Tyson needed surgery. It will be expensive, he said. I didn't ask what it costs. I do not remember the exact moment. I remember how irrelevant it sounded. Money belonged to normal life. Bills, rent, groceries, decisions. Tyson was behind a door injured, and somebody was trying to introduce arithmetic. There are moments when the future becomes simple. There was no calculation. There was only one thing required to keep him alive, so they operated. Then came recovery. Tyson returned home bandaged, medicated, and confused by betrayal of his own body. He tried to move the way he had before the accident and discovered that the instructions no longer reached the part of him correctly. I slept beside him on the floor. I carried him outside. I held his weight while he tried to stand. The first few attempts lasted only seconds. His legs shook, his body tilted. I kept my hands beneath him, prepared to catch him before he hit the ground. Take your time, I told him. This was advice I had rarely been given. As a child, hesitation had been treated like refusal. If I needed extra time to wake up, understand an instruction, process a room, or shift from one task to another, somebody usually increased the pressure. Tyson was allowed to hesitate. Nobody called him lazy. Nobody accused him of seeking attention. His body had been injured, so the struggle was visible enough to be respected. I sometimes wonder how differently people would have treated me if overwhelm had left bandages. Tyson took one unstable step, then another. He stopped and looked at me. That's good, I said. That's really good. Eventually, he could walk without my hands beneath him. Then he could move across the room. Then he could bring me a toy again. The first time he nudged one toward me, I nearly cried. He was still Tyson. Not exactly the Tyson from before, but enough of him had returned to recognize play as unfinished business. His body recovered. Something inside him changed. Before the accident, Tyson loved everyone with reckless confidence of a puppy who had not learned the world contained moving cars. He greeted people as though friendship had been established before introductions. Afterward, he still liked people. He simply preferred to like them from directly beside me. If I moved from the living room to the kitchen, Tyson followed. If I entered the bathroom, he waited outside. If I sat down, he placed some part of himself against me, a shoulder, his back, his head, across my foot. He became my shadow, except shadows generally provide more personal space. The therapist asked whether the attachment bothered me. Never. Not once. Maybe when I almost fell over him.
Did you want more independence from him?
No.
Why?
The answer felt too large of a question, because he had almost disappeared. After the accident, every ordinary theme became evidence that he had not. The sound of his paws behind me, the weight against my leg, his nose pushing open a door I had not closed completely, his head appearing beside me whenever food became involved, regardless of whether the food could reasonably belong to a dog. Annoyance requires a certain belief in permanence. It is easier to become irritated by someone when you assume they will be there after you finish being irritated. I no longer made the assumption with Tyson. His need to stay close did not feel like a burden. It felt like proof. The accident had taught both of us the same lesson. One moment, somebody can be there. The next, the road can become quiet. The therapist asked whether I blamed myself. I reviewed it.
That isn't what I asked.
I know. I had replayed the event enough times to build alternate versions in each one. I had noticed something earlier. I moved faster. I called him differently. I prevented the moment that had already happened. The mind likes alternate timelines because they create the feeling that control existed somewhere. But no amount of review changed the road. What changed was what came after. Tyson survived. He learned to walk again. He followed me everywhere. For the next several years, being loved sounded like paws behind me. And because I had almost lost that sound once, I never again mistook it for noise.
Chapter 12. Peak Life.
The therapist asked whether the years with Tyson were the happiest period of my life. Yeah. The answer surprised me with how quickly it arrived. Not childhood, not high school popularity, not any relationship. The happiest period of my life may have begun when I stopped chasing people. In 2016, I deleted the dating apps. There was no dramatic final rejection, no speech about independence, no ceremony in which I threw my phone into a river while inspirational music played. I was tired. Dating had always felt like entering a room where everyone else had received part of the instructions in advance. People said they wanted honesty, then rewarded confidence. They said to be yourself, but only certain versions of yourself seemed to qualify. I could perform well enough. I knew how to be funny, interested, confident, flirtatious, mysterious, or emotionally available in controlled portions. What I did not know was whether anybody liked me or simply liked the version that had completed the audition. So I stopped auditioning. I told myself it was temporary. I would take a year from dating and focus on buying a house. A year became 2, then more. I worked overtime. I saved money. I studied listings. I imagined rooms before I entered them and rejected properties for reasons agents probably considered irrational. The layout felt wrong. The noise from the street would become unbearable. The neighbors were too close. The lighting was bad. The yard would work for Tyson. The last category carried the most weight. Eventually, I signed the papers and received the keys to my own house. Tyson entered before I had furniture. He charged through the empty rooms, nails echoing against the floors, inspecting each space as though he had personally financed the purchase. Then he found the yard. That settled it. The house belonged to him. I sat on the floor surrounded by almost nothing. Tyson came back inside, walked over, and laid beside me. I had spent years associating success with witnesses. Popularity required people to see you being popular. Clothes mattered because someone recognized them. Confidence mattered because someone reacted to it. Even birthdays had once functioned as public rankings. Buying the house felt different. There was no school hallway, no audience, no secret admirer delivering floating above the doorway. Just an empty room, a set of keys, and a dog breathing beside me. For once, the accomplishment did not need to improve my position inside anybody else's understanding of me. It made my life easier. That was enough. The house gave me routines. I knew where objects belonged. I knew which sounds were normal. I controlled the lighting. I could pause music, turn down the television, eat the same meal repeatedly, work on a project until 3 in the morning, and leave something exactly where I needed it without somebody moving it to a more socially acceptable location. Tyson adjusted to every routine, or maybe he created half of them. He knew when it was time for bed. Sometimes I would be playing a game late at night. I would think, I should probably go to sleep. I would not move. I would not say anything. Tyson would stand, stretch, and walk toward the bedroom. How the hell do you know? He would stop and look at me. Come on. He noticed intentions before I turned them into actions. If I looked toward my yard work shoes, he became excited. If I thought about taking a drive, he moved toward the keys. If a suitcase appeared, his entire nervous system changed. People required announcements. Tyson read preparation. When I returned from work, he greeted me as though the possibility of my permanent disappearance had remained active until the door opened. He would stand against me, wrap his paws around my waist, and make a sound somewhere between crying and complaining. I'm home, I would tell him. The sentence mattered to both of us. I had friends. I still saw people. I played games, worked, created things, and moved through ordinary life. But I stopped measuring every quiet event against the belief that I was supposed to be searching for a relationship. Tyson removed the emptiness from being alone. That distinction would become important later. Alone describes the number of people in a room. Lonely describes what the room is missing. With Tyson beside me, the house was not missing anything. The therapist asked whether I had been depressed. No,
Were you isolating?
I don't think so.
What did it feel like?
Peaceful. She waited. This might have been my peak, I said. The phrase sounded sad after I said it, as though I had declared the best part of my life permanently over. But I did not mean that nothing good can come afterward. I meant that during those years, my needs and my life briefly matched. I had my house, my own routines, creative work, a small number of people I trusted, and somebody who never made me wonder whether my love was returned. I did not know I was autistic yet. I did not have language for masking, sensory recovery, social exhaustion, or the difference between solitude and withdrawal. I only knew that when I stopped chasing the life I was supposed to want, I became happier inside the life I already had. The therapist asked whether I felt lonely during those years. Not while Tyson was here.
And after?
My body tightened before I answered. That was the problem with calling something your peak. Eventually, you have to describe the descent.
Chapter 13, Yard Work.
The last time I asked Tyson to do yard work, he collapsed. That sentence still feels designed to hurt me personally. Yard work had begun as one of the worst symbols of my childhood. It meant a light switch flashing above me, my father yelling from the doorway, and Saturday morning converted into emergency before I was fully awake. Tyson had changed it. To him, yard work was not punishment. It was time with me. I could put on the same shoes that once represented dread, and Tyson would react as though I had announced a vacation. That day, I reached for my gloves. Tyson watched me. "You want to do some yard work?" He sprang up immediately. For 1 second, he was completely himself, excited, ready, almost moving toward me. Then his legs gave out. He took several steps and collapsed. The gloves fell from my hand. "Tyson?" He tried to rise. His body would not cooperate. My heart understood before my brain did. Something's wrong. Not a sore leg. Not exhaustion. Wrong. I dropped beside him and tried to help him stand. He could not hold his own weight. The world narrowed. There are emergencies in which my mind becomes useless. Too much information arrives. Nothing organizes. And every possible action feels equally urgent. There are other emergencies in which everything unnecessary disappears. This was the second kind. Lift him. Get the keys. Call the vet. Drive. At the local clinic, they examined him and reached the limit of what they could do. "There's nothing more we can do here," the veterinarian said. "There's an emergency hospital in Boise." Then we're going to Boise. The distance did not matter. The time did not matter. Boise existed in the direction of help. That was enough. At the emergency hospital, Tyson disappeared through the double doors. I sat beneath fluorescent lights while strangers worked on the most important living thing in my life. The lights hummed. The room felt too bright. Every door opening pulled my attention toward it. Every person wearing medical clothing became a possible delivery system for the worst sentence I had ever heard. I called my mother. I do not remember anything I said. I was crying. I know I told her Tyson was dying and the hospital was trying to save him. "Tell them to help him," she said. "I'll cover it." That was my mother too. The woman who had stayed silent when my father controlled our house. The woman who later refused to stand behind me during family conflicts. The woman who sent balloons to school and offered to pay whatever it took to keep Tyson alive. People would be easier to understand if love and failure could not occupy the same body. My mother repeatedly proved that they could. The hospital began blood transfusions, one, then another, 4 in total. Each one created a small new future in my mind. Maybe this one works. Maybe his numbers improve. Maybe the door is open and somebody says he's responding. Maybe we drive home together and become another story about the time Tyson almost died. The first accident had trained me to believe in recovery. He had been 6 months old, injured in the road, unable to walk correctly. Then he came home. He stood. He followed me. He gave us 7 years. I expected this story to recognize its earlier structure. Tyson gets hurt. I refuse to lose him. He survives. That had been our agreement. The transfusions did not work. The doctor explained it carefully. The words entered the room one at a time, but the meaning arrived all at once. They were not saving him. I looked through the explanation for another task. What else can you do? The answer came gently. Not enough. Try another transfusion. The doctor did not argue. He did not need to. His silence contained the limit. There are moments when money becomes irrelevant because a problem can still be purchased away. Then there are moments when even money loses its usefulness. I could pay for another test, another bag of blood, another hour. I cannot purchase the outcome. The therapist asked what I did when I understood. I brought him home
Why?
because if he was going to die, I was taking him home. I could not allow the hospital to become his final understanding of the world. Tyson knew my house. He knew the floors, the doors, the yard, the bedroom, the man cave, the path I had took from one room to another. He knew where I kept his treats. He knew which shoes meant work and which shoes meant we were going somewhere together. He knew the sound of my keys and the change in my breathing before I moved. The hospital knew his blood. I knew him. So I brought him back. The drive was 2 hours. Tyson lay in my arms. I cried the entire way.
Chapter 14. I'm right here.
Streetlights passed across the car. Light, darkness, light, darkness. Tyson lay against me while the highway carried us home. I held him tightly enough to feel every breath, but gently enough that I would not hurt him. The position became painful after a while. I did not adjust. I was trying to memorize him. The weight, the warmth, the shape of his head beneath my hand, the exact place where his body met mine. Some irrational part of me believed memory could function like storage. If I concentrated hard enough, maybe I could preserve enough detail to return to it later. I knew that was not how my memory worked. Memory had already betrayed me too many times. I could remember the emotional force of a childhood scene and lose the exact words. I could remember reading a chapter perfectly and retain none of the story. I could remember fear more clearly than dates. I did not trust my mind to keep Tyson correctly, so I kept repeating the moment to myself while it was still inside it. This is what he feels like. This is Tyson. Do not lose this. I've got you, I told him. I'm here. He had spent 7 years knowing what I was thinking before I moved. Now I wanted him to know only one thing. I had not left. When we reached home, the house still contained his entire life. His toys, his bowls, the places where he slept. The path worn into my routines by following me. For a little while, I allowed the familiarity to surround him. Maybe it was for him. Maybe it was for me. Eventually, we went to the local veterinary clinic. The room was quiet. The veterinary prepared the medication. Tyson rested against my chest. I kept my face close to his. You're a good boy, I said. The sentence was inadequate, but every sentence was inadequate. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. That one was true enough to continue. I'm right here. The medication entered. Tyson relaxed in my arms. His body became heavier in a way I had never felt before. I pressed my forehead against his. This is a particular cruelty in the peacefulness of euthanasia. The emergency ends. The struggle stops. The body that could not get comfortable finally becomes still. For 1 second, relief and horror occupy the same space. Then the stillness explains itself. I do not know what Tyson understood in his final moments. I do not know whether dogs understand death as an approaching event or only experience the body becoming tired. I know he understood presence. He understood me. He understood the sound of my voice, the pressure of my arms, and the fact that when he looked at me, I was there. The last thing he knew was that I stayed. The therapist was quiet after I told her, not the professional quiet she used to make me continue talking. A different quiet, human quiet. What happened when you went home? She asked. My house stayed the same. I looked around her office without seeing it. It just stopped feeling like home. Tyson had been part of the architecture, not physically, although he had certainly occupied enough furniture. He had become part of how every room functioned. The kitchen included the possibility of his nose appearing beside me. The bathroom included him waiting outside. The bedroom included his recognition that I had decided to sleep before I made the decision visible. The front door included his reaction when I returned. When he died, the walls remained, the rooms remained. Every object stayed exactly where it had been, but the relationship between those objects disappeared. A house can remain structurally complete and still become ruins. I returned carrying an empty collar. The silence was immediate. No pause approached, no crying greeting, no body leaned into me. For years, I had believed Tyson followed me because the accident made him afraid to lose me. Only after he was gone did I understand what his following had done for me. It had made every room confirm that I was not alone. Now each room delivered the opposite message. I walked into the kitchen, nothing followed. I sat down, nothing leaned against me. I went to bed. Nobody had known I was gone before I moved. The therapist asked what grief felt like. Wrong, emotionally, physically. My body kept expecting him. That expectation did not disappear because I knew he was dead. Knowledge and habit operate on different schedules. My brain understood. My nervous system continued listening. A collar might move. Nails might touch the floor. A dog might breathe from the doorway. The house remained prepared for Tyson. So did I. The first day, Clint came over. He knew I should not be alone.
Chapter 15. The Bark.
Clint entered quietly. He did not bring a speech. He did not ask me to explain whether Tyson had been like family, a phrase people use when they're trying to upgrade an animal's importance into something they recognize as legitimate grief. Tyson was not like family. Tyson was Tyson. Clint understood that the category did not need improvement. We can do whatever you want, he said. Let's play the game. The game was familiar. 2 televisions besides each other, 2 systems, the same room where Tyson had watched me play for years. Playing gave us instructions. Move here, watch that door, collect this, survive until the next checkpoint. Grief had no instructions. So we played. Clint did not force conversation. He allowed the game to fill whatever space words could not. For a while, I could look at the screen instead of Tyson's empty spot. Then we heard a bark. Close. Directly behind me. Both of us turned. The doorway was empty. I stared at it. That sounded like a bark, right? Clint kept looking toward the doorway. I definitely heard something. That mattered. For 1 second, I thought grief had begun generating sounds. The house had spent years teaching my brain to expect Tyson. Maybe the expectation had become powerful enough to produce him. But Clint heard it too. We never explained the bark. I did not need to. Some memories are damaged when people rush to decide what they mean. Maybe the sound came from outside. Maybe a television produced it. Maybe another dog barked exactly at the right distance and angle to place Tyson behind me for a second. Maybe grief opened a door that ordinary logic does not recognize. I only know that both of us turned. The doorway was empty. Clint stayed. That was the important part. People often believe helping someone through grief means finding the correct words. They search for meaning, reassurance, or a sentence that makes the death fit inside a larger system. Everything happens for a reason. He's in a better place. At least he isn't suffering. Those statements may comfort some people. To me, they sounded like attempts to make the speaker more comfortable with the existence of pain. Clint did not explain Tyson's death. He sat beside me while Tyson remained dead. That was harder and more useful. The next day, Stefan came over. He brought drinks and snacks. You want to talk or play? He asked. Play. So we played. He treated me like myself, not like an unstable object that needed careful handling. He did not require me to cry. He did not become uncomfortable if I did. He did not demand the visit become emotionally productive. The game filled the room again. The screens glowed. For a few hours, there was another person making noise in the house. Stefan understood something I would only identify later. Sometimes support is not helping somebody escape pain. Sometimes it's making the pain less lonely. Clint carried me through the first day. Stefan carried me through the second. Then Stefan's car pulled away. I closed the front door. The house became silent. I walked toward the kitchen. No pause followed. The therapist asked what Clint and Stefan had done for me. They showed up.
What did they say?
I don't remember.
What did they solve?
Nothing.
Then why did it matter?
Because they showed up. Loyalty is often presented as a dramatic act. Someone takes a punch for you, defends you in public, crosses the country, makes a sacrifice large enough to become a story. Most of the loyalty that saved my life was smaller. A friend entered the house. He sat down. He played a game. He returned the next day, or became the person who arrived after the first one left. Nobody rescued me from grief. They made sure grief did not have me completely to itself. Then came the third day. That was when I learned how much sound Tyson had made. Not barking, not whining, existing. Nails against the floor, tags moving against the collar, breathing from somewhere nearby. The small impact of his body changing positions. The soft movement behind me whenever I walked from one room into another. For 7 years, my life had contained a sound effect. Following. On the third day, that soundtrack stopped.
Chapter 16. The Sound of Following.
I walked from the bedroom to the kitchen. One set of footsteps. I stopped. The silence behind me felt occupied, as though something should have been standing inside it. I looked back. Nothing. Grief turned ordinary movement into a series of failed appointments. I opened the refrigerator and expected pause behind me. I left the bathroom door cracked and expected Tyson to push his face through the opening. I sat in the man cave and expected him to choose a place where he could see me. Each expectation lasted only a fraction of a second. Then reality corrected it, again and again and again. People talk about losing someone as though the loss occurs once. It does not. The death happens once. The loss repeats every time the world reaches the place where that person used to be. The television made noise. It did not make company. It turned the game louder. The house remained silent beneath it. During the next several days, I kept catching myself moving around Tyson. I stepped past the place where his bowl had been. I reached toward the empty space. I looked behind myself. His toys became objects instead of invitations. I had never realized how much of my attention had been shared with him. Even when we were not interacting, part of me knew where he was. That awareness had become automatic. Now the automatic signal returned in air. Tyson not found. By the 5th day, I knew I could not continue inside that version of the house. I wrote to an animal shelter on Facebook. I lost my dog. I don't know what to do with this silence. The response was simple. Come see us. The therapist asked whether I was trying to replace Tyson. No.
How long had he been gone?
6 days.
That quickly?
6 days was long enough. The question carried a judgment people sometimes attach to grief. How soon is too soon? How long must the house remain empty before love becomes respectful again? I did not believe another dog would be Tyson. That was the point. There could not be another Tyson. I was not searching for the same face, the same personality, or the same relationship. I was trying to survive the physical experience of living in a house where nothing followed me. I went to the shelter on November 4th, 2 days before my birthday. Childhood birthdays had once been defined by absence, no party, no presents worth describing, no public evidence that I mattered. That year, I approached my birthday carrying a different kind of absence. I walked past the kennels, large dogs, small dogs, Old dogs whose eyes carried histories I could not know. Puppies performing maximum cuteness with the strategic desperation of inmates seeking parole. I did not choose the first dog. I did not choose the saddest. I did not choose the one that looked like Tyson. Near the end, a young shepherd mix watched me. He did not throw himself against the kennel. He did not perform. He watched. I knelt. He approached and pressed his face in my hand. A shelter worker stood nearby. He's probably 1 or 2 years old, she said. Do you want to meet him? Outside, he walked beside me, not like Tyson. That mattered. He moved differently. He watched differently. His body held its own history. I knelt beside him. I'm not looking for who I lost, I said. You're going to have to be yourself. He licked me. The interview process was apparently complete. I brought him home. I named him Bud. The name came from a Bundy, although his personality would eventually make him closer to Al than the affectionate companion I had imagined. Bud entered cautiously. He inspected the rooms without Tyson's assumption that all property had been acquired for his benefit. Then his nails touched the floor. Click, click, click. I stood still and listened. Not Tyson's sound, a new one. The house did not become the house it had been. It became alive in a different way. The therapist asked whether the grief ended. No.
Did bringing Bud home help?
The house could breathe again. Bud did not remove Tyson's absence. He placed a living presence beside it. That distinction protected both of us. I did not need him to behave like Tyson. Bud did not need to compete with a dead dog who had become perfect through grief. He could be difficult, independent, funny in ways I had not expected, affectionate on his own terms. Different did not mean lesser. I would need years to understand that lesson fully. At the time, I only understood the sound, 4 paws moving around the house, a body occupying space, another living thing whose needs required me to get up. 6 days after Tyson died, the silence finally had competition.
Chapter 17, The Runt.
Demo found me at work. I was still carrying grief visibly enough that a woman noticed it. People often say they can hide what they are feeling. Usually this means the people around them have agreed not to ask. This woman asked. She knew I had lost Tyson. She told me she had a litter of English lab puppies. She had been selling them for $600 each. But I want you to have one, she said. For free? Yes. Why? Because I can tell you need him. My first instinct was suspicion. Generosity makes me uncomfortable when I cannot identify the transaction. What does she want? What would I owe? Why would somebody give something away worth $600 to a person she knew from work? The answer appeared to be exactly what she had said. She believed I needed the puppy. There were 11 of them. 11 English lab puppies create less of a viewing experience and more of a weather event. They climbed over one another, pushed toward attention, fell, recovered, and used their siblings as unstable furniture. At the bottom of the pile, the smallest puppy was getting trampled. I reached into the movement and lifted him out. You're getting your little ass kicked down here. He licked me. That was apparently a pattern in my dog selection process. The woman looked at him. You sure you want the smallest one? I looked at the other puppies. They were larger, stronger, and better positioned to attract attention. The runt had spent the entire introduction underneath everybody else. He's been overlooked enough. I took him home. Bud approached carefully. Demo did not. The puppy charged at him with confidence of an animal who had learned nothing from being the smallest member of 11 dog pile. Bud stepped back. Demo continued forward. The size difference meant nothing to him. For the first time since Tyson died, I laughed without having to decide whether laughing was appropriate. It came out before grief could stop it. I named the puppy Demo. Bud and Demo did not replace Tyson. People use replacement language because they imagine love as a position. One dog leaves, another dog fills the vacancy. But love does not operate like employment. Tyson's position remained his. Bud created another. Demo created another. The house expanded around them. The therapist asked whether they saved me. They kept me moving.
Isn't that the same thing?
No. Saving implies the danger ended. It did not. I still missed Tyson. I still listened for him. I still carried the memory of a drive, the weight of his body in my arms, and the last time I told him I was there. Bud and Demo gave those feelings somewhere to go. Grief contains love that has lost its assignment. The routines stop. The care stops. The ordinary acts that once carried affection no longer have a destination. There's nobody to feed, nobody to let outside, nobody to call from another room, nobody to watch for changes in your face. Bud and Demo did not take Tyson's love. They gave mine new work. Demo required constant supervision. He followed me closely enough to create traffic problems inside my own house. He wanted to participate in activities that did not require a dog, including brushing my teeth. You do not need to supervise toothpaste. He disagreed. Bud preferred distance. He might stay across the room, appearing uninterested while quietly repositioning himself whenever I moved. Demo placed his body against me. Bud made sure he could see me. At first, I misunderstood Bud's distance. Tyson's love had been constant, physical, and impossible to misread. He followed me. He learned. He leaned. He cried when I came home. I had begun to believe that the love should always announce itself that clearly. Bud did not. He remained himself. He could be independent without being absent. That would become another lesson I needed from him. Different love is still love. But during those first weeks, I was not thinking philosophically. I was cleaning up after a puppy, adjusting Bud to the invasion, and trying to understand how the house had gone from unbearable silence to two dogs with incompatible opinions about personal space. It was exhausting. It was alive. The therapist watched me for a moment.
You were comfortable trusting dogs again.
Yes.
Were you comfortable trusting people?
I looked down at my hands. The woman at work had given me Demo with no demand attached. Clint and Stefan had shown up when Tyson died. There were still people capable of kindness, but kindness had started to feel like an exception. I needed to document carefully. What happened, she asked. It started with my car. The Audi was not expensive. That was one of the things I liked most about it. From 10 feet away, nobody could tell.
Chapter 18. The Audi.
The Audi was not expensive. That was one of the things I liked the most about it. From 10 feet away, nobody could tell. It was an older Audi TT, small and rounded with the kind of shape that made the entire car look designed instead of assembled. Behind the wheel, I felt more successful than I was. The logo did work that my bank account could not. I knew that was part of the attraction. I had spent my childhood studying the objects people use to communicate status. Shoes, clothes, games, cars. The object did not need to be expensive. It needed to be recognizable. The Audi was recognizable. People saw it and made assumptions. For once, I liked their assumptions. But the car was not only another mask. I genuinely loved it. The shape, the way the interior wrapped around me, the low driving position, the feeling of seeing it parked outside of my house and knowing it belonged to me. Some things began as symbols and became attachments. The Audi became my favorite car. It needed paint. My mother's husband was connected to a body shop. I offered to pay to have the work done there. He refused. Collision work paid better. My car would take up space that could be used for something more profitable. I understood the business explanation. I did not like it, but I understood it. The shop was eventually sold. The new owner and my brother-in-law offered to help me with the Audi. They could paint it while it was there. They could repair the heater core. That sounded like the solution I had been waiting for. I trusted them with the car. At first, the disassembly looked professional. The dashboard came out, the seats came out, trim pieces were removed. Wires appeared where a finished interior had been. Bolts and screws collected in cups. Cars often look temporarily destroyed while they're being repaired. I knew that. The ugly middle was supposed to be part of the process. The problem was the middle never ended. More pieces came off, then went back on. The project stalled. The people who had offered to help became less available when I asked what was happening. Dates moved, explanations changed, the car remained apart. At some point, temporary damage became permanent through neglect. There was no single dramatic moment. Nobody wrapped the Audi around a telephone pole. Nobody dropped it from a lift. Nobody called and said, "We destroyed your car." They simply took it apart and stopped knowing how, when, or whenever they could return it to me as a functioning vehicle. That made accountability slippery. Every individual action sounded small. A dashboard removed, a wire disconnected, a missing fastener, a repair delayed, a piece placed somewhere nobody could remember. No single screw totaled the car. Together they did. When I finally had someone else examine it, the assessment was simple. Putting it right would cost more than the car is worth. That sentence became the family's defense. The car was not worth much. They said it as though low market value converted destruction into inconvenience. The Audi might not have been valuable according to a pricing guide. It was valuable to me. More importantly, it was mine. The therapist asked why the difference mattered. Because people kept telling me what I was allowed to care about.
Did they say that?
Not directly.
What did they say?
That it was a cheap car.
And what did you hear?
The damaging cheap things doesn't count. She waited. I heard versions of that logic before. You were fine. It wasn't that serious. That happened a long time ago. Nobody meant anything by it. The event becomes smaller because the person describing it would prefer not to feel responsible. I was expected to evaluate the Audi from the position. It was old. The repair was difficult. The shop had changed hands. Other work became more important. Nobody had intentionally decided to destroy it. From their position, the situation was unfortunate. From mine, I had delivered my favorite car to people I trusted and received a disassembled problem nobody wanted to own. Intent mattered. It did not repair the car. The therapist asked who took responsibility. Nobody.
Did they apologize?
Not in a way that changed anything.
Did they offer to pay?
No.
What did they do?
They waited.
For what?
For me to get tired. That was a strategy. They did not need to prove they handled the situation correctly. They only needed to survive my questions longer than I could continue asking them. Eventually, the person who keeps bringing up the damage becomes more irritating than the damage itself. That is how accountability gets reversed. First, someone hurts you, then you become the problem because you refuse to stop describing it. For almost a year, I stopped asking. The Audi remained unusable. Every time I saw it, I felt the unfinished argument sitting inside it. The seats, the dashboard, the wires, the missing pieces. It was still shaped like my favorite car, but had become evidence. They did not crash it. They totaled it, one screw at a time.
Chapter 19, Publish.
I stopped asking about the Audi for almost a year. That did not mean I stopped caring. It meant that I had learned that asking produced the same cycle. I raised the issue. Someone minimized it. I became more specific. Someone had become defensive. My tone became the new problem. The original issue disappeared. So I left the Audi where it was and put my attention into something I could control. I wrote a book. Writing a book was not a reasonable response to a damaged car. It was not supposed to be. Creating had always been where I placed my energy that had nowhere useful to go. People could misunderstand me. Software usually told me what I had done wrong. A file did not become offended when I revised it. A page did not accuse me of dwelling on the past because I returned to an unfinished paragraph. Projects had rules. Even difficult rules were better than invisible ones. I worked on the book late into the night. Then the night became early morning. I reread sections that no longer looked like language because I had stared at them too long. I adjusted formatting. I checked the cover. I reviewed the publishing information. Every step created another opportunity to delay. A finished project is vulnerable in a way that an unfinished project is not. While a book remains on your computer, nobody can reject it. They also cannot read it. Eventually, dawn began entering the room. Bud and Demo were nearby. One probably believed I had chosen the correct time to begin the day. The other likely believed humans were poorly designed animals who refused to sleep on schedule. The publish button remained on the screen. I clicked it. There was no explosion, no music, no delivery person entered carrying balloons. The website processed the files. Then my name appeared beside the cover. I had published a book. For several seconds, I allowed myself to feel it. I had made something that did not exist until I made it. The boy who had once read an entire chapter without retaining the story had written one. The child who had believed his father's definition of stupid now had his name attached to a book. I wanted to tell someone. I called my sister. I published a book. Okay. I waited. Silence. That's it? What did you want me to say? I did not have a prepared answer because I did not expect the question. Congratulations would have worked. That's awesome. I'm proud of you. Tell me about it. Any sentence that recognized I had not called to report the weather. I was not asking her to organize a parade. I wanted my accomplishment to register. What do you mean, what do I want you to say? I wrote a book. Okay, you wrote a book. Something inside the morning changed. The accomplishment still existed. The file was still published. My name remained beside the cover, but the emotional temperature dropped. This is one of the dangers of bringing joy to someone who has not agreed to hold it. You arrive carrying something alive. They hand it back as information. I looked toward the Audi. The car was still there, disassembled, unresolved, waiting for me to either accept what had happened or become irritating again. I do not know why the two subjects joined inside me so quickly. Maybe the indifference sounded the same. My book did not matter enough for enthusiasm. My car did not matter enough for accountability. I had spent the night creating proof that I could finish something. The Audi remained proof that people I trusted could destroy something and wait for me to disappear from the discussion. What is happening with my car? I asked. Her tone changed immediately. Why are you starting this again? I'm not starting it again. It never got resolved. It's a cheap car. There it was. The sentence everybody returned to when they wanted the value of the object to become the value of the wrongdoing. That isn't the point. Then what's the point? The point is they took my car apart and left it that way. Nobody did it on purpose. I never said they woke up planning to total it. Then why are you acting like this? Because nobody gives a shit what they did to me. The conversation accelerated. The exact wording may have shifted. Memory becomes less reliable when anger rises because the body records force before language. I remember being talked over. I remember trying to return to the Audi and watching the conversation move toward my reaction instead. I remember the pride from publishing the book draining out of the room. The therapist asked why I had raised the car that morning. Because she acted like the book didn't matter.
Those are different subjects.
I know.
Then why connect them?
Because they felt like the same subject.
What subject?
I thought about the answer. Whether anything mattered because it mattered to me. I had spent my childhood converting private needs into public value. A birthday mattered if classmates admired the party. Clothes mattered if they recognized the brand. A car mattered if it looked expensive. A book mattered if somebody was impressed that I wrote it. I was still looking for outside confirmation, but accountability should not have required admiration. They did not need to love the Audi. They only needed to recognize that it was not theirs to destroy. The argument grew louder. So did I. I wish I could say I remained controlled, but that would make the next part easier to defend. I did not. I lost my temper. The day I published my first book became the day my family broke apart.
Chapter 20, The Door.
I threatened to break my sister's front door. That belongs in the story. It'd be easy to ride around it. I could focus on being dismissed. I could explain how long the Audi had remained damaged, how many times responsibility had been avoided, and how quickly the conversation had moved away from what happened to me. All of that is true. So is the threat. I swear I'll come break your front door. The call ended. I stood in my house with anger moving through me faster than thought. The sentence had not repaired anything. It had not made my sister understand. It had transformed me into the easiest part of the conflict to condemn. There is a reason people reach for threats when they feel powerless. A threat creates the sensation of force. It replaces being ignored with the possibility that someone may finally become afraid enough to listen. That does not make it acceptable. I had spent years despising bullies for using fear as communication. Then I used it. The therapist asked whether I intended to break the door. I don't know.
You don't know?
I know I wanted her to believe I might.
That is still a threat.
I know. The point of telling the truth is not to make every scene resolve in my favor. I was hurt. I was angry. I was also wrong. Both truths survived the call. A vehicle pulled up outside, then someone pounded on my door. My father. He had received his version of the story quickly. I opened the door. You threatening your sister now? Did she tell you what happened to my car? I don't give a damn about your car. Of course he did not. The sentence had followed me through childhood in different forms. He did not care why I was overwhelmed. He cared whether I obeyed. He did not care why I had failed to retain what I read. He cared that the failure allowed him to call me stupid. Now he did not care what had happened before the threat. He cared that I had given him a clean reason to confront me. I know you don't care, I said. That's the whole problem. The argument moved inside the house. His body changed before the fight did. Shoulders, hands, the familiar preparation. I was no longer a child beneath a blanket, but my nervous system recognized him before the adult part of me could organize the scene. For a moment, he was standing in the bedroom doorway, attacking the light switch. Click, click, click. Get your ass up. What are you, stupid? The memories did not replace the room. They occupied it at the same time. My father shoved me. The fist come up. Then we collided. I do not remember the fight as a series of controlled movements. Furniture shifted, a picture fell, bodies hit objects. Years of fear became physical without becoming meaningful. There was no satisfying moment when the child defeated the father. Real confrontations rarely provide the clean symbolism people expect from movies. I did not suddenly feel powerful. I felt flooded. Anger, terror, humiliation, and old muscle memory arrived together. I had spent most of my life preparing for violence I hoped it would never happen. Football, fights, toughness, the refusal to admit fear. I had built an identity around the belief that nobody could make me look weak. Now I was fighting my father inside my own house, and nothing about it felt strong. Eventually, he backed toward the door. You're done, he said. Yeah, he left. The house became quiet. My book remained opened on the computer. The cover was still there. My name was still beside it. The morning had begun with evidence that I could create something permanent. It ended with another relationship becoming permanent in a different way. The therapist asked me whether that was the last time I had spoke to him. Yes.
Because he decided you were done?
No.
Then why?
Because I was. That did not mean I felt nothing. Estrangement is often described as a clean act of self-protection. You identify someone as harmful. You remove access. Your life improves. Maybe it happens that way for some people. For me, it felt like amputating something infected and then being surprised the missing limb still hurt. My father had frightened me, insulted me, made ordinary mistakes feel like evidence of stupidity. He also had been present through most of my life. The body does not erase attachment simply because the mind produces a convincing argument. I still remember his voice, his habits, the version of him that existed between the worst moments. But the physical confrontation ended the possibility that I could keep treating the relationship as damaged but active. The door closed behind him. I did not follow. That was the day I stopped calling him father.
Chapter 21. Not in the middle.
After my father and sister were gone, I kept waiting for my mother to care, not privately, not in a general way, specifically. I needed her to look at the Audi and the book, the argument, the threat, the fight, and the years underneath, all of it, and say something had gone wrong. She did not have to agree with everything I did. I had threatened my sister's door. I could admit that. I needed my mother to admit something too. Her husband had been connected to the building and this shop. Her daughter was involved in the conflict. Her son had been left with the destroyed car and a family united around the idea that his reaction mattered more than the original damage. I called her. They destroyed my car, I said. You and your husband own the building. Your daughter is involved. I don't want to be in the middle. I'm already in the middle. I don't know what you expect me to do. Care. There are answers that become louder because nobody responds. Care. I was not asking her to fight anymore. I was not asking her to repair the Audi herself. I was not asking her to approve the threat or the confrontation with my father. I wanted evidence that what happened to me created an emotional response inside her. She did not give me one I could recognize. The therapist asked whether my mother believed neutrality would preserve the family. Probably.
Did it?
It preserved everybody except me.
I thought you said she did not choose sides.
She did.
How?
Refusing to intervene always benefits whoever can live with the current situation. The Audi could remain destroyed. The people responsible could continue their lives. My sister could dismiss it. My father could arrive at my house ready to fight. My mother could avoid the discomfort of confronting any of them. I was the only person who needed something to change. Neutrality protected the arrangement. The months passed. I would open my phone and hover over my mother's contact. Sometimes I began a message. I deleted it. Holidays arrived. I considered calling. I did not. The silence did not begin as a formal cutoff. There was no announcement, no final letter explaining boundaries. I stopped reaching. She did not cross the distance. Eventually, the absence became the relationship. The hardest part was not believing my mother had never cared. That would have been cleaner. I remember the Valentine's balloons, the classroom door opening, the name being called, the unsigned card saying secret admirer. I remember the hospital in Boise and my mother telling me to help Tyson, telling me she would cover the costs. Those moments were not imaginary. She had been capable of showing up in large and beautiful ways. That made every later absence harder to understand. The therapist asked whether I believed she loved me. Yes.
Then why did you leave?
Because love that only appears in emergencies doesn't make you safe in between them. My mother cared in moments. Some of those moments arrived exactly when I needed them. But I never learned how to predict which version of her would appear. The mother who imagined her son receiving balloons in front of the classmates. The mother who paid to keep his dog alive. The mother who remained quiet while his father called him stupid. The mother who did not want to be in the middle when the rest of the family closed around him. I wanted one version to invalidate the other. It did not. Human beings rarely cooperate with clean categories: loving, unloving, brave, cowardly, present, absent. My mother could love me and fail me. That was worse than either simple explanation. If she had never cared, I could have buried the relationship beneath anger. Because she had cared, I kept waiting for the next flash. Another balloon, another rescue. Another moment when she would just recognize that I was hurting and decide the discomfort of helping me was worth entering. The moment did not come. The therapist asked whether I cut my mother off. I stopped asking her to choose me.
Is that the same thing?
It became the same thing. I had spent my childhood trying to become valuable enough that nobody would abandon me. Popular, funny, athletic, tough, well-dressed, desirable, successful, useful. I had believed the correct performance could make love consistent. By then, I had written a book, bought a house, survived grief, built a life, and learned how to carry myself like somebody who did not need anyone's approval. None of it made my mother choose discomfort on my behalf. For the first time, I stopped auditioning for the role of her son.
Chapter 22, The Puzzle.
The family rupture happened before I knew I was autistic. After the diagnosis, everything became connected to everything. That was not entirely helpful. A diagnosis can explain decades in a single afternoon. It could also turn every memory into evidence. The light switch, reading without retaining, birthdays, the need for routine, the same foods, people speaking at once, popularity, bullying, football, the drops, Tyson, the Audi, my father, my mother. I wanted each memory to stand up, identify itself, and enter the correct category. Autism, trauma, masking, personality, choice. I imagined the categories as separate containers that would have made the past manageable. The light switch belonged under autism because the sudden brightness overwhelmed my nervous system. It belonged under trauma because my father used the light as a weapon. Both were true. My reaction was neurological. His behavior was a choice. Autism explained why the light affected me so intensely. It did not make attacking the switch an acceptable way to wake a child. I placed bullying under choice. Then I wanted to move part of it under masking. Popularity had become safety. Cruelty sometimes produced laughter, and laughter protected status. Then fear entered the explanation. Then immaturity. Then the fact that I sometimes enjoyed the reaction. The categories overlapped until the system stopped looking like organization and started looking like a conspiracy board. Lines everywhere. Autism to sensory overload, trauma to hypervigilance, masking to popularity, popularity to bullying, fear to football, shame to money, love to grief, grief to dogs, dogs to safety, safety back to control. The therapist asked why I needed a perfect explanation, because I wanted to know which parts were really me.
Aren't all of them you?
That seems unfair.
To whom?
Me. She waited. And the people you hurt, I added. It would have been comforting to discover that every ugly choice had been caused by something outside of my control. Autism made me understand. Trauma made me angry. Masking made me perform. Poverty made me lie. Fear made me aggressive. Each explanation held some truth. None removed responsibility. Autism did not make me celebrate the O.J. Simpson verdict like a touchdown. It may have contributed to how I organized the meaning, but I was also 10. Autism did not force me to bully a girl. Status rewarded it. Immaturity permitted it. I chose it. Trauma did not force me to threaten my sister's door. I felt powerless and reached for fear. That was an explanation. It was not permission. The diagnosis did not convert me into the innocent character at the center of every memory. That would have been another mask. The therapist asked what autism did explain. The pattern.
What pattern?
Why everything that looked unrelated felt related inside me. I had spent decades believing my difficulties were individual failures. I was bad at transitions, too sensitive to sound, too rigid about plans, too intense about interests, too emotional about rejection, too exhausted after being social, too bothered when people changed the rules without admitting the rules had changed, too capable to need, too overwhelmed to deserve the label capable. Autism did not create one excuse for everything. It created a common language for experiences I had been blaming on character. That distinction mattered. A person can be responsible for his behavior without being morally responsible for having a nervous system. I wrote one sentence in the center of the imaginary board. Popularity equals safety. For most children, popularity might have been enjoyable. For me, it became infrastructure. If people liked me, confusing behavior became funny. Style covered difference. Confidence prevented questions. Athletic ability gave me a recognizable role. Popularity reduced the chance that someone would examine me closely enough to notice the processing underneath that performance. The mask worked. That was why I had kept wearing it. The therapist asked what I felt when the pieces began fitting. Relief.
And after relief?
Grief. The answer surprised me. I had expected self-knowledge to feel victorious. I finally knew the mystery was solved. The score made sense. Instead, every explanation opened a second question. How did nobody notice? Not one teacher, not one coach, not one parent, not one adult who saw the boy reading perfectly while understanding nothing. Not one person who watched confidence appear exactly when fear became most intense. I was not grieving the diagnosis. I was grieving the years before it.
Chapter 23. Somebody should have noticed.
I watched my autistic nephew cover his ears. The television was too loud. An adult noticed it and turned it down. Nobody yelled. Nobody accused him of being dramatic. Nobody told him the sound was not that loud. Nobody increased the volume to prove he would survive it. The room simply adjusted. He needed less sound. Someone gave him less sound. The entire interaction took seconds. I was glad for him. I was also furious. That anger was not directed at my nephew. He deserved understanding. Every child does. The anger came from seeing how small an accommodation could be. Turn down the television. Give him a moment. Explain the instruction differently. Do not attack the light switch. Do not call him stupid because his brain performed one part of a task and dropped another. The help I had imagined some impossible intervention sometimes required only an adult to notice. The therapist asked whether adults understood autism when I was a child. Not the way people do now.
So is it fair to blame them?
Not for missing a diagnosis they didn't understand.
For what then?
For what they did with the things they could see. Nobody needed the word autism to know that a flashing bedroom light into a child's eyes while threatening him was cruel. Nobody needed diagnostic training to know that stupid was not an educational strategy. Nobody needed a specialist to understand that a child who could read aloud but not explain the chapter required help rather than humiliation. The diagnosis was hidden. The distress was not. I had simply become good at cleaning it up before anyone had to respond. That created a cruel loop. The better I became at masking, the less evidence remained that I needed help. The less help I received, the more necessary the mask became. Adults saw the result and called it proof. You had friends, you played sports, you were popular, you dated, you worked, you bought a house, you wrote a book, you were fine. Fine became another word for functional. Functional meant the system continued operating. Nobody asked how much power it consumed. Before the final break with my father, I told him I thought I might be autistic. You're not autistic, he said. You're fine. No, I said. I was functional. At this time, I did not fully understand the difference. I do now. A bridge can remain functional while developing cracks nobody inspects. A machine can remain functional while overheating. A person can remain functional by sacrificing everything that does not appear on the performance report. Sleep, peace, relationships, self-understanding, the ability to admit pain before it becomes anger. I had been functional. I went to school. I worked. I made friends. I became popular. I survived football games, family conflict, sensory overload, financial stress, grief, and constant translation between what I felt and what other people could tolerate seeing. The system operated. That did not mean it was undamaged. The therapist asked who I blamed most for nobody noticing. My father.
Why?
Because he noticed the differences, he just named them wrong. stupid, lazy, difficult, disrespectful, too sensitive. Each label identified a visible event and assigned it a moral cause. The problem was not that nobody saw me struggling. The problem was that people saw the struggle and decided it revealed something defective about who I was. My grandmother had come closest to interrupting that conclusion. He is not stupid. Help him understand. She did not have a diagnosis. She had compassion. Sometimes compassion reaches the correct answer before expertise does. I thought about the boy beneath the blanket while the lights flashed. The boy holding a book he could read but not explain. The boy pretending his family had purchased birthday presents. The teenager refusing pizza while hungry. The football player saying he was good before checking whether he could feel his body. The kid jumping into the canal because being terrified in public felt more dangerous than the water. I could finally see him clearly. Not as a collection of embarrassing stories, not as a weaker version of the adult I became, as a child doing complicated work without instructions. I wanted to go back and tell him, the lights hurt because your nervous system is reacting. Reading is not the same as retaining. Needing warning before a transition is not defiance. Being overwhelmed does not mean you are weak. You are not stupid. You are missing information. But the past does not accept new dialogue. The child remained where he had always been, so I grieved him. Not because his life was entirely miserable. It was not. He laughed. He had friends. He became popular. He found wrestling, hip-hop, sports, grandma, and people who made life feel larger. That was part of the confusion. A child can be joyful and still need help, successful and still lost, loved and still unprotected. The therapist asked what I wanted from the people who missed it. At first, an apology.
And now?
I want them to stop using my success as proof that nothing happened. Somebody should have noticed. Maybe not autism, maybe not the entire pattern, but somebody should have noticed the cost. The therapist looked at me.
Did everyone leave when you stopped performing?
No,
Who stayed?
the people who knew me before I learned how to impress anybody.
Chapter 24, Be Money.
Brandon comes over every week. Most people call him Brandon. I call him B Money. He walks into my house carrying a drink and the energy of someone who does not require an event to justify being here. What's up, brother? Same shit. Perfect. Then he sits in his usual place. There's comfort in someone having a usual place inside your life. No invitation needs to be redesigned. No conversation requires an opening performance. We start a game. Sometimes we talk constantly. Sometimes we barely talk. Neither silence means something is wrong. That is rare. Many relationships require maintenance through visible reassurance. Are you mad? Are you bored? Why are you quiet? Do you want me to leave? Silence becomes a question that someone has to answer. With Brandon, silence is allowed to be silence. The game continues. Bud stays in his area. Demo positions himself wherever he can interfere most efficiently. Brandon accepts both dogs as part of the environment, including Demo's belief that every guest has arrived partly to admire him. You good? Brandon might ask. Not really. Then he keeps playing. No motivational speech, no demand for details, no attempt to talk me out of whatever I feel. The answer changes the information without changing the visit. Not really? All right. I'm allowed to remain not really while someone stays. The therapist asked what Brandon did differently. Nothing.
Nothing?
That's why it works. Brandon and I knew each other since we were children, not vaguely, single-digit ages. We came through the same tiny town, the same school buses, classrooms, teams, and people whose names remained attached to local stories decades after everyone involved had stopped being interesting. He knew me before I bought anything impressive, before the Audi, before the house, before the book, before I understood masking well enough to describe it. He knew the version of me that was still constructing the character. More importantly, he kept showing up after the character stopped being useful. Our friendship did not depend on nostalgia, although we had plenty of it. Nostalgia alone cannot sustain weekly visits. Eventually, people run out of stories about the old days. Brandon remained part of the current days. That mattered. Some friendships are built around shared activity, some around crisis, some around who both people used to be. Ours contained all three without becoming trapped inside any of them. We could remember childhood, play a game, talk about work, say almost nothing. He did not need me to entertain him. He did not need access to a version of me that was always funny, productive, confident, or emotionally easy. He also did not treat me like a patient after the diagnosis. I remained the same person to him. The information changed, the relationship did not. That may be one of the purest forms of acceptance, not a dramatic declaration, not somebody announcing that they love you despite autism, as though autism has entered the room wearing a ski mask, just continuity. What's up, brother? Same shit. Perfect. The therapist asked whether Brandon understood everything happening inside me. No,
Then why did he feel safe?
because he didn't pretend he had to. People sometimes respond to diagnosis by becoming experts on a person they already knew. They explain your behavior back to you. That must be the autism. You're doing that because you're autistic. Suddenly, every preference becomes a symptom and every emotion requires clinical subtitles. Brandon did not do that. He let me explain what mattered. He ignored what did not. The friendship remained larger than the diagnosis. I had spent much of my life believing safety came from control. Control from impression, control the clothes, control the joke, control the amount of fear visible in my face, control what people knew. Brandon offered another kind of safety, predictability without performance. He came back week after week, no matter how successful I felt, no matter how lonely, no matter whether I had finished a project or spent the entire week stuck inside one. He came through the door and sat in the same place. Loyalty is often quiet enough to be mistaken for routine. That does not make it smaller. The therapist asked whether Brandon had ever saved my life. Not in one dramatic moment. What about over time? I looked at the question differently. There are people who pull you from the water. There are people who make sure you do not have to enter every dangerous place alone. Sometimes the second kind receives credit because nothing dramatic happens while they are there. Brandon did not cure grief. He did not repair my family. He did not explain autism. He gave me a weekly point on the calendar where I did not need to prove that I deserved company. That was enough to become structural. I had lost relationships because I stopped performing. The remaining circle became small. Small did not mean empty. Clint showed up when Tyson died. Stefan took the second day. Brandon kept coming after the emergency ended. The therapist asked who else made me feel safe without requiring performance. The answer returned me to cigarette smoke and sunlight, dinner cooking, a book in my hands, a place being patted beside her on the couch. Grandma, I said. My favorite grandson. I was her only grandson. That never stopped her.
Chapter 25, Her Birthday.
After Tyson died, I went to Grandma's house. It was her birthday. The timing felt almost insulting. Birthdays were supposed to mark another year of somebody being alive. I had just spent 2 hours holding Tyson while he moved the opposite direction. Before the shelter, before Bud, before the house learned how to make noise again, there was Grandma. I drove there with swollen eyes and a physical exhaustion that follows hours of crying. Grief had settled behind my forehead like pressure. Every light looked bright. Every sound felt unnecessary. I had not gone because I believed I could celebrate. I went because she was the safest person I knew. When I was a child, Grandma's house had smelled like cigarettes and dinner. Grandpa would be cooking steak and potatoes or something else solid enough to make the house feel organized. Grandma would be in her usual place, ready to call me Joshy and declare me her favorite grandson despite the complete absence of competition. Her house had always made room for me. That day it was quiet. Grandma? No answer. I stepped further inside. Grandma? The kitchen was empty. No pans, no food cooking, no television loud enough to cover the sound of people living. I walked toward her bedroom. She was lying on her back. Her mouth was open. Her body was completely still. My brain did not wait for evidence. Tyson appeared over her, his body in my arms, his head against my chest, the final weight of him after the medication entered. Grandma? She did not move. The grief inside me became panic so quickly that I could not separate them. 5 days earlier, a still body might have meant sleep. Now stillness meant death, until proven otherwise. I took one step into the room. Grandma? She breathed. A low snore escaped her. Her chest rose. She was asleep. Only asleep. The relief did not arrive cleanly. My legs weakened. I gripped the doorway and tried to regulate my breathing without waking her. The therapist asked why I did not go sit beside her. I couldn't.
Why?
I had gone there because I needed her, and she was there. That wasn't what I saw.
What did you see?
The next person I could lose. I backed out of the room. I did not wake her. I did not tell her happy birthday. I did not sit beside her and let her call me Joshy. I left the house and returned to my car. Then I cried again. Grief changes the meaning of ordinary images. A sleeping person becomes a warning. An unanswered call becomes an emergency. A quiet room becomes evidence. Once death enters your life through a specific door, your mind begins checking every similar door. Is this it again? Is this the next one? I had spent 7 years watching Tyson closely enough that I believed I could understand him before he moved. Now I watched everyone I loved for signs that movement might stop. The therapist asked whether I felt guilty for leaving. Yes.
Did Grandma know you had come?
I don't think so.
Did you owe her a performance because it was her birthday?
No.
Then what do you feel guilty about?
That she was alive and I treated her like she was already gone. That was not entirely fair. I had not treated her as gone. I had reacted to the possibility. There is a difference, but grief does not care much about technical distinctions. I wanted Grandma to remain the person who had protected me in my father's presence, the woman who had challenged the word stupid before anybody understood why the word was wrong. I wanted cigarette smoke and sunlight, dinner cooking, her hand patting the couch. Come sit by me, my favorite grandson. I did not want to see age in her body. I did not want to see vulnerability. Most of all, I did not want to understand that the person who had represented safety throughout my childhood could not remain safe from time. Tyson's death had broken the illusion of sequence. Before him, I understood death as something that came for old people, sick people, people whose lives had reached a socially recognizable ending. Tyson was 7. He had been excited about yard work, then he was gone. After that, age no longer felt like protection. Health did not feel like protection. Love definitely did not feel like protection. I sat in the car outside Grandma's house while she slept peacefully inside. I had gone there looking for safety. Instead, I discovered that safety could age too.
Chapter 26, After Grandpa.
Grandpa died from a heart attack. There was no long transition in which everyone slowly adjusted to the idea. He was there, then he was not. That was death's preferred method of rearranging the house. The kitchen changed first. When I remembered Grandma's house from childhood, Grandpa was often cooking steak and potatoes, food with weight, meals that smelled like somebody had a decision about what the evening would be. After he died, the kitchen became another room. His chair remained, the objects remained. The house still had the same walls and windows, but the marriage that had organized the place was missing half of itself. Grandma became smaller, not only physically. She seemed to occupy less space inside her own life. Hey, Grandma. Sometimes recognition arrived immediately. Joshy. Other times, it took longer. Her eyes would study my face as though my name had been placed somewhere nearby and she needed time to find it. Then the light would appear. Joshy. I learned to not punish the delay. I had spent my childhood being treated as though slow processing revealed a bad attitude or low intelligence. I knew what it felt like when someone demanded that your mind move faster for their convenience. So I waited. Grandma would begin telling me something, a memory, a story about a relative, something she had seen or believed she had seen. Halfway through, the thread would disappear. She would stop. What was I saying? It's okay. No, I was telling you something. I know. What was it? Sometimes I could return the story to her, and sometimes I could not. On certain days, she looked towards Grandpa's chair. He should be home soon. The first time I almost corrected her. Grandpa died. The factual answer rose automatically. Then I looked at her face. Correcting her would not restore reality. It would deliver the death again. He's probably out doing something, I said. She nodded. That man is always doing something. The therapist asked whether lying bothered me. It wasn't the truth.
That is not what I asked.
No,
Why not?
because the truth was only going to hurt her. I had built much of my identity around accuracy. Details mattered, dates mattered, words mattered. When people changed their versions of an event, I experienced the change like a structural defect. Truth was supposed to stabilize things, but truth also has timing. A fact can be correct and still be cruel when the person receiving it cannot use it for anything except suffering. Grandpa was dead. Grandma had already experienced losing him. I did not believe she needed to experience it fresh every time her memory offered him back. Cancer took whatever grief had loosened. Her body changed. Her mind changed. Some days she knew exactly where she was. Some days she seemed to move between decades without announcing the transition. I began studying her the way I studied every person whose reactions mattered. Her eyes, her breathing, the pressure of her hand, how quickly she recognized me. Whether she followed the conversation or simply enjoyed the sound of my voice, there was fear in that attention. There was also love. As a child, I had studied people to avoid rejection. With Grandma, I studied her to find the part that remained reachable. Sometimes it was a joke, sometimes a memory, sometimes only her hand closing around mine. The therapist asked whether she still felt like Grandma. Yes.
Even when she did not know where she was?
She usually knew where I belonged. That was the part that stayed. She might lose the subject of a sentence. She might look towards Grandpa's chair and wait for a man who's not returning. She might need several seconds to connect my face to my name. But when the connection arrived, it carried the same warmth. Joshy. The safest people in our lives do not always protect us through action. Sometimes they protect us by maintaining a place where we are recognized. Grandma's recognition became less reliable. That made every successful return more valuable. Her mind could lose the conversation. Her body could weaken. The house could become unfamiliar around her. Then her fingers would close around mine. And for that moment, she still knew exactly where I belonged.
Chapter 27. Read it back.
When conversations became difficult, I read to Grandma. It was one of her few activities that did not require her to carry half of the exchange. I could sit beside her bed with a book and let the words move in one direction. Ready? Go ahead, Joshy. Then I would read. The first time, the memory returned so clearly that it almost replaced the room. I was 9 again, a book in my hands. My father waiting for proof that I was stupid. Grandma asking me to read a chapter. I could pronounce every word. I could control my pace. I could make the sentences sound correct, even while their meaning passed through me without staying. When I finished that childhood chapter, Grandma had smiled. You read really good. Then came the question. What was it about? I had no answer. My father had used this failure as a verdict. Grandma had used it as a reason to defend me. Years later, I sat beside her bed with another book. I read clearly. Her eyes closed. For a moment, I wondered whether she was asleep. I kept going. I did not know how much she understood. I did not know whether the sentences stayed with her or disappeared as soon as they entered. I did not test her. That was the gift. When I was a child, adults believed comprehension had to be demonstrated immediately or it did not exist. Explain what you read. Repeat the instruction. Show me you understood. Prove that the information reached the correct place. Grandma had not understood my processing problem. She had still refused to let failure become identity. Now, I did not understand hers. So I gave her what she gave me, credit for trying. Maybe she understood every word. Maybe she understood the rhythm. Maybe she understood only that her grandson was sitting beside her and had chosen not to leave. Understanding is not always a summary. Sometimes it is comfort. Sometimes it is recognition without language. Sometimes it is the nervous system deciding the voice beside you is safe. I continued reading. After a while, Grandma opened her eyes. You read good. I looked at her. Yeah. Always did. The sentence nearly stopped me. I lowered my eyes to the page and tried to find the place where I'd left off. The words blurred. Where was I? Grandma smiled faintly. I don't know. I laughed. Finally, we're even. She may not have understood the joke. She smiled anyways. The therapist asked why the moment mattered so much. Because she remembered
What did she remember?
that I could read.
Did you need her to remember the childhood scene?
No,
What did you need?
for her voice to still disagree with his. My father had called me stupid more often than anybody challenged him. His repetition became identity. Grandma's repetition became resistance. You read good, favorite grandson, still undefeated. There were small sentences repeated across years. But small sentences can become structural when the opposite ones have been repeated just as often. I did not need Grandma to diagnose autism. I did not need her to explain working memory, language, processing, attention, or the difference between decoding text and retaining meaning. I needed one adult to reject the easiest cruel explanation, and she did. Years later, when her own understanding became uncertain, I returned the favor. I did not ask her to prove she was still present enough to deserve company. I sat beside her. I opened the book. I read it back.
Chapter 28, I knew.
The night before Grandma died, I knew. Nobody told me. There was no doctor standing nearby delivering a timeline. I watched her breathe. Her breaths had become shallow. The space between them seemed longer. Although I could not tell whether time had changed or my attention had become too precise, I had spent my life noticing patterns other people missed. A shift in someone's expression, a change in tone, the exact moment a joke stopped being funny, the difference between a room being quiet and a room waiting for something. Most of the patterns were harmless. This was the one I wanted to be wrong about. I had gone to see Grandma after work. Her body looked tired in a way sleep could not repair. I stood beside the bed and watched her chest rise, pause, fall, longer pause, rise. I called my sister. You need to come tomorrow. Why? I think Grandma's going to die. Did somebody say that? I'm saying it. There are moments when certainty does not arrive as thought. It arrives physically. My body understood what I was watching before I could construct an argument for it. The therapist asked whether I often trusted that kind of knowledge. No,
Why not?
because I spent most of my life being told my reactions were wrong, too sensitive, overthinking, making a big deal out of nothing, misreading the situation. When people repeatedly tell you your internal signals are unreliable, you begin demanding evidence from yourself that you would never require from anyone else. Did I actually hear the tone change? Was the light really that bright? Was the room truly overwhelming? Did they mean to hurt me? Was I allowed to feel what I felt? That night, I did not debate myself. I knew. I sat beside Grandma and took her hand. I love you, Grandma. She did not answer. Her fingers moved against mine. The movement was small, maybe automatic, maybe intentional. I chose to receive it as an answer. I had learned not to force dying people to perform reassurance for the living. I did not need her to open her eyes. I did not need a final speech. Movies teach us to expect the dying to summarize their love with perfect timing. Real bodies are busy dying. They do not always cooperate with the scene structure. Her fingers moved. That was enough. I stayed beside her for a while. I tried to memorize her hand the way I tried to memorize Tyson's body during the drive home. The shape, the temperature, the pressure. Again, memory became an assignment. Do not lose this. The cruel part was that I had already learned concentration did not guarantee retention. I could read perfectly and forget the story. I could stare directly at a moment and later lose its edges. I could remember the emotional force forever while doubting the exact arrangement of the room. But I tried. The mind may not preserve a perfect record. Love attempts the recording anyway. The therapist asked whether I said goodbye. I told her I loved her.
That wasn't my question.
No,
Why not?
because saying goodbye felt like giving permission
Permission for what?
to leave, to stop fighting, to die. I knew that was irrational. Grandma was not waiting for administrative approval from her grandson. But grief is full of private superstitions. If I did not say goodbye, perhaps the ending had not formally begun. So I said what I could. I love you. Not goodbye. When I left, I looked back at her. Her breathing continued, shallow, unsteady, still there. My sister came the next day.
Chapter 29. Favorite grandson.
My sister and I were both with Grandma when she died. The fact would become complicated later. At the time, it was simple. We stood on opposite sides of the bed. I held one of Grandma's hands. My sister held the other. For once, nobody was arguing about history. Nobody was deciding who had been treated better, who had been believed, who had been protected, or who had caused the latest rupture. We were two grandchildren watching the person who connected us to the safest parts of our childhood reach the end of her life. Grandma's breath slowed. Each one became an event. Rise, fall, wait. Rise, fall, wait longer. The room reorganized itself around her chest. Nothing else mattered. Not the furniture, not the sounds outside, not the phone, not the future conflict that would eventually separate my sister and me. Only the next breath. Then Grandma exhaled. We waited. No next breath came. Death can arrive without movement, no dramatic struggle, no final announcement. One breath exists, the next one does not. The difference is everything. I pressed my forehead against her hand. Images moved through me without asking permission. Cigarette smoke suspended in sunlight. Grandpa cooking. A book in my hands. My father saying stupid. Grandma refusing the verdict. Her hand patting the couch. Come sit by me, my favorite grandson. I had spent my life trying to become someone people would choose: popular, funny, athletic, tough, creative, successful. Grandma had chosen me before I had any of that to offer. I was a child. That was the entire qualification. The therapist asked whether I'd spoke to her after she died. Yes.
What did you say?
Your favorite grandson. The old answer returned inside me in her voice. My only grandson. Still counts, I whispered. I laughed once through the tears. It felt wrong and exactly right. That joke had survived childhood. It had survived my father's insults, my confusion, Grandpa's death, cancer, and Grandma's fading memory. Now it survived her. Repetition can become its own kind of affection. It can also become inheritance. My sister remained across the bed. We had shared the moment. Later we would become estranged. That did not make her presence at Grandma's death false. A memoir becomes dishonest when every earlier scene is written to support the ending. My sister came. She held Grandma's hand. We were together when Grandma took her final breath. Years later, we would not speak. Both facts belong. The therapist asked what losing Grandma left with me. Evidence
Of what?
that I wasn't impossible to love. I looked toward the floor, just hard for the wrong people to understand. That answer sounded cleaner than the grief felt. Grandma's love did not erase the damage from anyone else. It did not make my father's voice disappear. It did not make my mother consistent. It did not make my sister and me connected. But it prevented one conclusion from being complete. If every important relationship had required me to perform, I might have believed performance was the only reason anyone stayed. Grandma contradicted that. She loved me before the mask, before I learned how to enter a hallway, before wrestling taught me posture and hip hop taught me presentation, before I understood the social value of birthdays, clothes, cars, girlfriends, confidence, or attention. She knew the child underneath all of it, Joshy. That child had spent years believing he was defective. Grandma did not know the diagnosis. She knew the verdict was wrong. Losing her meant losing the person who had carried that knowledge for me before I could carry it myself. But she left the knowledge behind. I was not stupid. I was not impossible. I had been loved without winning anything first. Grandma's final breath ended her life. It did not end her argument. You have been listening to Mask Off, a memoir, written and narrated by Joshua Eric Jensen. Joshua Eric Jensen also publishes children's books under the pen name JJ McNasty. Thank you for listening. The end.